As usual, we are gathered here today to listen to another dispensation of the Lord Buddha's teaching. Let us remind ourselves that it is because of the Lord Buddha that we have the gift of Dhamma today. It is because of His infinite sacrifice, infinite compassion, infinite wisdom, through which He dedicated Himself for many yawns in samsara. Every single time, with every single birth, fulfilling the paramitas, moving one step closer, perhaps inches closer. But despite the effort, despite the toil, despite the labor and the hard work, never giving up, all for the benefit of all sentient beings. It is because of Him today we have the path to liberation. It is because of Him today we can find the path to ultimate happiness, ultimate bliss, a bliss that is unconditional. So prior to us commencing, let us pay homage to the Supremely Enlightened One, the Blessed One, the Unparalleled One, the Unequaled One, the Omniscient One, the Perfect One, the Gautama, Samma Sambuddhajan Wahanse. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Also, before we commence, let us take a moment to observe the 5 precepts, and as usual bearing in mind that once again I'm having to observe these precepts. It has become a duty that I do so, more so than an opportunity. Let us remind ourselves of that. It is because of the 5 precepts and my observance of it that today I am less of a harm and evil to society, myself and others. But this is only because virtue is still not part of who I am. It is something that I'm having to embed within myself. Let us take a moment to remind ourselves of that fact. And reminding of that fact, contemplating on that fact, in the hope and wish and determination that may I never have to observe these 5 precepts. May these precepts be part of the very fabric of my sentiments. With that thought and determination and resolve in mind, I ask you all to chant the Namaskara 3 times and all together to observe the 5 precepts. Buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dhammaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Saṅghaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi dhammaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Dutiyampi saṅghaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi buddhaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi dhammaṃ saranam gacchāmi, Tatiyampi saṅghaṃ saranam gacchāmi. Saranagamanaṃ sampunnaṃ Pānātipātā vēramaṇī sikkhapadam samādhiyāmi. Adinna dana veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Kamesu miccāchārā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Musāvādā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Suramēraya majjapamā daṭṭhānā veramani sikkhapadang samadhiyami. Tisaranena saddhiṃ pañcasīlaṃ dhammaṃ sādhukaṃ surakkhitāṃ kattvā appamādena sampādeta. Okay, you may now all be seated. Most venerable members of the Mahasangha, members of the audience, before we commence this sermon, let us take a moment to invite the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons and the dead. Those beings who throughout our infinitely long history and journey in samsara we will most certainly have come across. Beings who when we met them might have been humans, perhaps animals, perhaps devas, brahmas, who came to our help, support, assistance. We are unable to say where they may be today, but having received the ultimate gift, that is the gift of Dhamma, we today have the opportunity to pay back the duties that we owe them. So before we commence, let us take a moment to invite them. Also let us take a moment to invite those beings who are our mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, nephews, grandparents, so on and so forth, our teachers, not just in this birth but in previous births. If any of them have today been born in the woeful plains, although the Dhamma may not be of much help to them, may they come along and witness this meritorious deed. May the offerings made to the Buddha, offerings made to the Dhamma, offerings made to the Sangha, and a large gathering of people listening to the Dhamma being preached, all these meritorious deeds, may through witnessing these meritorious deeds they be able to acquire due merit, which may help them to remove themselves from the unwholesome planes, to be born in the blissful planes. And for all those beings who are today in the blissful plane, may through the course of this sermon they be able to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. So as I now make this invitation, I request you all to extend that invitation in your hearts and in your minds. Invite all those beings, no matter how they might have contributed to your life, how small or large that contribution might have been, invite them all. May they all join us. May they all witness this meritorious deed and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Samanta Chakravalesu Atcha Gacchantu Devata Sadhammam Munirajasnsa Sunantu Saggamokkadang Dhammasavana Kalo Ayang Badanta Dhammasavana Kalo Ayang Badanta Dhammasavana Kalo Ayang Badanta. Also, before we commence, let us take a moment to reflect on the truth, the reality that although today I am clad in robes and you in white, And this is a representation of the transformation that has happened in our lives in the very recent past. Throughout our long journey in samsara, we have not always had that privilege, not always had that opportunity. This is because our associations have virtually always been with immoral, ignoble people. Immoral, ignoble associations that defiled our minds with raga, dvesha, moha, desire, aversion and delusion. Having been blinded in avidya and tanha, ignorance and attachment, we may have offended the Samma Sambuddhas, the Pacceka Buddhas, the Arahata Buddhas, insulted them, abused them, slandered them, the Anagami, Sakurdagami, Sotapannas, be they on the path or having attained the fruits. Any word, speech or thoughts of slander, abuse, desecration that we might have directed towards them, either knowingly or unknowingly, may today block our path to liberation, our understanding and comprehension of the Dhamma. So prior to us commencing, let us all take a moment to seek forgiveness from the noble ones as well as the Buddha's ministry, the Sambuddha Shasana, for any words, speech, or for any words, actions or thoughts of abuse, slander or desecration that we might have directed towards them. And finally, before we commence, I invite you all to make a firm resolve that through the course of this sermon, if there are any gaps in your understanding, in your knowledge, in your comprehension, that keep you from attaining the noble attainments, may through the course of this sermon, you all be able to fulfill those gaps. And with that firm resolve in mind, I invite you all to prepare yourselves to listen to this sermon. Okay. Some new faces. Always welcome. As you know, the objective of these sermons is so that I don't have to keep seeing you again and again. Right? New faces are welcome. But ideally, once you come here a few times, you won't have to come back here again. That is the purpose of doing these sermons. Not to build up a fellowship. But I think you all know that, so I'm not going to go over that again. Have you all played the maze? Do you know what the maze is? Yes. Do you know what a maze is, Buddha? Okay. So a maze is where you start in this, it's a structure, usually a square or a rectangular structure. Sometimes they're circular. I remember when I was a young kid, and I'm sure you must have come across them. You know, in books, you have to draw how the rat gets to the cheese, and you have to draw the path on your books. So that's a maze, right? Have you done that? Yeah, there you go. You know what a maze is. You're amazing. So there's a maze that we're all playing in. Now the reason that we are playing this maze, or we are playing in this maze, is because there's a promise. There's a promise that there are jewels to be found, valuable jewels to be found in various parts of this maze. You're going to have to find your way through it, but if you get to it, then it's yours to keep. If you can snatch it, if you can grab hold of it, it's yours to keep. Until then, you just have to keep moving. But while you're playing this maze, things can happen. Things that you don't expect can happen. Sometimes the walls fall on your head, and that's the end of your chapter. Sometimes there are beasts that lurk in the dark corners. They're just waiting for prey. And you are prey. So when they see you, they jump at you, and that's the end of your chapter. Sometimes there are gaping holes that you don't even know that they're there. One wrong step of the foot, and that's the end of your chapter. But despite all this, there are jewels to be gathered. So, it's a game worth playing, isn't it? So there's the master of the maze that says, here are the rules of the game. Are you willing to play? And the thing is, we all said yes. So this is why we are playing in this maze. The master of the maze said, here are the rules of the game. There are jewels. If you can grab them, if you can find them, they're yours to keep. But beware of the threats that might be around. But you should be able to grab a few while you're at it. So the master said. Now we didn't think twice. You heard the word jewels, you heard the word, oh, they're worth something. There are the friends who came along and said, hey, you should come along because I've been playing this maze myself and it's quite interesting. So you should play too. And so we all joined this game. Now, the thing is though, this master of the maze is a tricky chap. There's one bit of detail he deliberately avoided sharing with us. And that is that yes, there are jewels. And if you move along long enough, if you go around all the paths, you'll see them. But what he didn't share with us was, they're all holograms. So they look as if they are real. And then when you see one, you feel pretty excited. Hey, Jules, found one. So you run towards them, and the moment you put your arm out to grab them, it's gone. They're holograms. They're holograms that have been designed such that the moment it detects any movement over it, it's gone. But you and I, despite the fact that we see that this is a hologram, we are still in the belief that, well, this one was a hologram, but the next one I'll find is going to be a real one. So I'm going to still keep looking. I'm going to keep moving along. And so we invite other friends along as well. People we know, our friends and family. Hey, you should come along. This is really interesting, a really cool maze that I'm playing in. You should come along. And so you've all become maze runners. Running in the maze, trying to find jewels to pack your bags with, in the hope that it will bring you riches beyond your wildest imaginations. So how long have we been running? Pretty long. How many jewels have you gathered by now? None. See, he gets it. Clearly you know what I'm speaking of here. This maze is the maze of samsara. That we've been running, trying to grab a jewel since time immemorial. Because the people that we got to know, our friends, our associates. Immoral, ignoble people. Now there are two. Immoral and ignoble people. Why, what's the distinction? There are two types of people. The ignoble people, they think that these jewels are real. So they keep running after them. And without any spite in their hearts, what they say is, hey, you should come along. Let's all run this race. We're all in it. We're all in it to win. So while I'm making effort to grab a few jewels, I think you should come along as well. And I'm only sharing this with you through compassion for you, through the genuine kindness that I have in my heart. And that's very nice of them. It's very good of them to say that. But they don't realize that they have been fooled themselves. These are the ignoble people. They're not the immoral people. The immoral people are the ones who encourage you to engage in unmeritorious deeds in your quest to gain jewels. What are the jewels that we speak of here? These moments of pleasure. The moments of pleasure. Ashwada matra. We keep running along the maze in circles. Sometimes we come across walls, dead ends, and then we have to keep turning. We have to turn back and run back, try and trace our steps back again to find that last wrong turn that you took, and then find another path along. But we keep running. We don't give up, because in the back of our minds there's a deep-seated view that says, don't give up. It's there. You're just going to just have to keep trying. Don't give up. Just keep trying. See how determined you can be? I will refuse to accept that any of you are not determined enough. You're all determined. The thing is, you're all determined to find the wrong thing. That's the problem. You're all very determined people. Great. How fantastic that is. Wound up toys. You've got enough potential energy within you to keep running. The moment the charge runs out, wind again, and off you go. So you've all got energy, you've all got determination and resolve. The problem is you're running after the wrong thing. And when I say you, I speak of all of us, me included. Everyone that is not yet, anyone and everyone that has not yet decided for themselves, enough playing this game. Why? Because all these jewels are holograms. No matter how much you keep running, you're not going to find anything that is worth anything, that is of value. It's just going to be energy that has been exerted. It's just going to be the toil, the labor, the sweat, hard work. Well, not just that. What about those beasts I said lurk around in the dark corners? How many of you have become prey to those beasts? How many of you fell into these holes and broke a leg, broke an arm, went blind, lost your teeth, lost your hair, like me? All in the quest to try and acquire these jewels. For as long as in our minds we have this view that these jewels are real, what are we going to do? We're going to keep running. We're going to keep at it. So determined. So determined. So don't any of you come and tell me I am not determined enough. Because that is not true. That is a fallacy. You are all very determined. All we have to do then is just put you on the right track. Because determination, you're capable of. Put on the right track, now the same determined person runs in the right direction. Following the paths that have a board that says exit. That is the path that now we seek. That is the path that we now choose to follow. Those boards that say exit. But until the Dhamma was gifted to us, until we were able to understand, listen to and comprehend the Dhamma, whenever we saw the exit board, what did we do? We looked away. God, no, not the exit board. There's more I can do. There's further in this maze that I have to explore. I can explore. And I'm sure I'm going to find one of those jewels. But one day, you come across a noble person. And a noble person is one who has realized that these jewels are all holograms. Because the moment it looks real from afar, absolutely granted, it looks real from afar. But the moment you run up close, put your hand out, put your arm out to grab it, it's gone. Poof. Like magic. And then you cry. You weep. You get angry and frustrated. You get really annoyed. All that effort I put into achieving this, to acquiring this, to grabbing this, now where is it gone? And sometimes you think that other people are responsible for that jewel to disappear. You think that it's someone else has taken it away from you. Just because another guy was also around when you went to put your arm out and grab that jewel, just because another guy was also around at the time, we came to the conclusion, he grabbed it. He grabbed what was rightfully mine. She grabbed what was rightfully mine. I will not let her or him do that to me ever again. I'm going to teach him a lesson. I'm going to teach her a good lesson. Because that's what immoral people advised and instructed us to do. So we've been running in this maze since time immemorial. Who's the master of the maze? Mara. He's the master of the maze. He likes for this maze to be busy. Mara likes for this maze to always be populated with lots of people running around trying to find jewels. And he has a beautiful computer program which he clicks buttons on, and then these holograms appear. And for as long as there are people in his maze, he's happy. So when someone sees the exit sign, now he gets angry. He doesn't like that. He'll do whatever he can to cover the exit signs up. And from time to time, although he can't remove the exit sign from the walls because they have been cemented to the walls, he can't remove them. What he can do is he can grow bushes and large trees that cover these exit signs. And sometimes the creepers that grow on the walls of this maze, they cover the exit signs. And that happens. Actually, that is how it is most of the time. So even if someone feels, I need to find a way out of this exit because I'm really not satisfied. I've been looking for these jewels. Every time I put my arm out, I'm not really grabbing anything that is substantial. It's time I got out of this. Then you look around for the exit signs and you can't see any. Not because they're not there, just because they've been covered up. So it takes a really intelligent, a really clever, a really wise person to uncover these signs for himself. Through a lot of work, having gone down every single path on this maze, he comes to the conclusion there are no jewels to be found because all these jewels are fake. They're all holograms. No matter how long I'm going to keep running, I'm not going to find anything. And then he also thinks, look at all these poor people. Look at all these poor people who, in the wrong view that these jewels are real, that they're actually going to be able to acquire something of value. Look at them. Wasting away every breath, wasting every modicum of energy that they have in their bodies, trying to find jewels, trying to find things of value. Oh, alas, if only they knew that these jewels were holograms, that they weren't real. What a pity. What a pity. So then he comes to the determination, he comes to the conclusion, I shall find the exit signs, I shall find my way out of this, and I will leave a breadcrumb trail so that others can follow the path and come out of this maze. The thing is, these breadcrumb trails don't last forever. What was that story where there are breadcrumbs? Beg your pardon? Hansel and Gretel, yes, thank you. What happened to the breadcrumbs, Sudha? Birds ate them, see? That's what happens. The birds eat the breadcrumbs. So although this young man finds the way out, and once he's found the way, he leaves a breadcrumb trail so that others can follow in his footsteps. Those who want to follow that path must do that earnestly, must do that without wasting their time, because this breadcrumb trail is not going to be there forever. Now isn't that our story? Kind of summed up in 10-15 minutes? We're all stuck in a maze. What's this maze? Samsara. The maze of samsara. The only reason that we are in this maze, the only reason that we don't feel like we need to exit this, despite the fact that there are beasts that hurt us, despite the fact that there are thorns, there are dangers that lurk in the bushes, and we know of them. Not that we don't, we know of them, because think about all the times in our lives where we have suffered the consequences. All the times that we've had to cry, weep and lament. That was when we suffered. So we know that there are dangers lurking around the bushes. But for as long as that promise of jewels, real jewels of value are there, we're going to keep looking. Because we don't know yet, we haven't fully understood yet that they're all holograms. That they're not real. They're all fabrications. So that is the ignorance, avidya. Ignorance that keeps telling us, well, this jewel that you put your arm out to grab, yes, that was a hologram, but the next one you come across is going to be a real one. So keep looking, keep moving. One day you're going to succeed. Try and try again, and one day you shall succeed. How many times have you heard people say that? Try and try again, and one day you shall succeed. True, if you direct that in the right direction. If you direct that energy in the direction of the exit boards, then yes, try and try again, and one day you shall succeed. But if you direct that energy towards the maze, try and try again, and what's going to happen? You will forever be in the maze, never being able to get out. So this is why we spend a lot of time in these sermons really trying to analyze what is this pleasure that we experience. Because it's that pleasure that we so attach ourselves to, that we find happiness in. Those moments of pleasure which are ultimately nothing but vexation being relieved. The suffering that we experience being relieved. That's all it is. For those who've been coming along to sermons regularly will know this by now. Those moments of pleasure are nothing but relief from suffering. Examples we've used in the past. If you have a headache, a paracetamol, yes, will take away the pain. That's why it's called pain relief. The pain relief can do you wonders, provided there was pain beforehand. There's no pain. Take a paracetamol. Are you going to feel any better? No. But headache, paracetamol, how are you going to feel in a couple of hours' time? On top of the world, right? Yes. That's a moment of pleasure. Moments of pleasure which are only moments of relief from suffering. Now, on one occasion, the Buddha explains that the reason that beings go through in samsara, go through this transmigration process, the reason that they do that is because they're not able to penetrate through what they experience as being pleasure. In the Dhammsak Payathum Sutra Deshana, in the first discourse that the Buddha gave, he speaks of the Four Noble Truths. And in the first Noble Truth he says, Idam dukkhaṃ pariññayanti me bhikkave chakkung udapadi, jnanang udapadi, vidya panya udapadi, vidya udapadi, aloka udapadi. Pariññayanti. What does that word mean? Pirisinda dakinna. It's a singular translation. And I'll translate that into English. Pirisinda. Piri is pleasure. Priyabhav. Sindin. To penetrate. Penetrate pleasure. In other words, there's a veil that covers what lies behind what you experience as being pleasure. We feel the pleasure, but that lies in front of a veil. Move the veil out of the way, now you'll really see what lies beneath. Remember we spoke of the rat who always becomes prey, who always gets caught in the trap. So this rat always keeps running around, but he's never caught in the trap until there's bait that's been attached to the trap. Either a bit of cheese, some biscuit or something like that. Some bait has to be there attached to the trap. Without the bait, you're not going to be able to catch the rat. You can engage as many traps as you like. You're not going to be able to catch one rat. But put one tiny bit of bait on one of those traps, the next day you're going to find what you were looking for. So this rat, if the rat does not like to get caught, and there are two classes, remember I said this rat can take. One of these classes is how do you avoid the trap? The second class is how do you avoid the lure of the bait? Which class must the rat take? The first class is how do you avoid the trap? The second class is how do you avoid the lure of the bait? Which class must the rat take? The first or the second? The second. Because a trap never got fooled by a trap. A rat always got fooled by the bait. Because that is what is pleasurable. The bait is pleasurable. Sight, sound, smell, taste, touch. These are the things that you find pleasurable, don't you? This is why you say they are the sensual parts of the world. This is why you have the senses to enjoy sensuality. Sensual. Kama. Rupa kama, Shabda kama, Gandha kama, Rasa kama, Pottabha kama, and then Dhamma kama. Thoughts. This is why we have senses. 6 senses to enjoy pleasure in 6 different ways. Only for as long as we think this pleasure is actually real. The day you realize that this pleasure is nothing but a hologram, behind which just lies loads and heaps of pain and suffering, that day you will no longer go after the pleasure. So this is why the Buddha says the reason that beings go through in samsara is because they are unable to penetrate pleasure. Ashwade pirisinda dakinna bari nisa. Because you can't penetrate pleasure. You don't have the wisdom to do that. This is the reason the Buddha gives. So the Buddha continues, he says, the day that comes where you are able to penetrate pleasure and see the suffering that lies behind, adinava, then naturally you will fall into nissarana, which is emancipation. You won't have to do anything special after that. You won't have to do anything else, anything additional. All you have to do is penetrate pleasure, move the veil away, move the curtains away, and begin to see the suffering that lies behind it. Once you've seen the truth, there is nothing else you need to do to find liberation, to find emancipation. Just the sight of the truth is all you need. So having said that, on another occasion the Buddha says, the reason that beings go through samsara is because they are ignorant of the dependent origination process. Paticcasamuppada. He says both these things. The reason that beings go through in samsara is because they are unable to penetrate pleasure. On another occasion he says the reason that beings go through in samsara is because they are ignorant of the dependent origination process. Now you tell me, for the Buddha to be saying these two things and then saying that this is the reason why beings keep going through in samsara, is he not implying that they are one and the same? Ignorance of the dependent origination process is ignorance of pleasure, of what lies behind the veil, of the inability to penetrate the veil of pleasure, is the same as ignorance of dependent origination. So the day that comes where you are able to understand and comprehend the dependent origination process, Perhaps we'll discuss a little bit along that today. It might be a little bit heavy, but we've been talking about a lot of stuff and building up the background to this over many sermons, over many weeks. So I think the majority of you will be able to take a lot from today. For others, that's okay. Just listen to it again. Go back and listen to the old sermons, and you'll find snippets that will help you to understand what it is we are going to be talking about today. So understanding, comprehension of the dependent origination process, paticca samuppada. What that enables you to do is to see behind the veil and see the truth behind the pleasure. That is what we need to use dependent origination for, nothing else. A knife can be used for a lot of things. A knife can be used to cut bread, slice up bread, cut vegetables, cut down trees, chop down trees. But sometimes people use it to slit their throats, don't they? So in a world where people use knives to slit their throats, what is the most important use of someone who knows how to use a knife? What must we learn from someone who's willing to come and teach us how to use a knife? Let's say we are all using knives, but we don't know how to really use a knife properly. We pick a knife up, we put it next to bread and start slicing it. Oh, okay. Bread can be sliced. Great. Then you use a knife and you start chopping a tree. Oh, right, okay. Trees can be chopped. But what else can you do with a knife? You can slit your throat. So this guy who's not really sure what a knife can do, he's just trying out. By experimentation, he's learning. Eventually, there's going to be a day where he's going to hold that knife next to his neck. And then he's going to learn by experimenting what might happen if I now start moving this knife. But unfortunately, he won't live to tell the tale. So, if we are fortunate enough to come across someone who's a master of knives, who knows how to use a knife properly, what's the first lesson that we need to learn from this person? There's potential danger that can happen by someone who misuses a knife, who abuses a knife, right? Who misuses a knife. How do you avoid such dangers? How do you avoid a situation where I'm going to hold that knife next to my neck, next to my throat and start slicing it? How do I avoid that? Likewise, ladies and gentlemen, this is what the dependent origination process is for. Because at the end of the dependent origination process, at the end of the Buddha's teaching of the dependent origination process, there's one bit which is crucial to understand why he preached the dependent origination process. Where he says, Eva me tassa kevalassa dukkha khandassa samudayo hoti. Those are the last words at the end of the dependent origination process. Where he goes, bhava pacchaya jati, you know where it begins, right? Avidya pacchaya sankhara, so on and so forth. Bhava pacchaya jati, jati pacchaya jara marana, shoka parideva, dukkha domanassa, eva me tassa kevalassa, dukkha khandassa samudayo hoti. I think that's the most important bit that most people forget to pay any attention to. Because it's at the end he says, this is why I teach you the dependent origination process. I teach you how to use the knife so you can make sure so you can learn how not to slice your throat with it. How to use it for the right thing and not use it for the wrong thing. In order that we use it for the right thing, he gives us that teaching, that instruction at the end. This is how you use it. It's like the instruction booklet. Actually, that is what it is. Having prescribed the dependent origination process, at the end he gives us the manual. The instruction booklet. Eva me tassa kevalassa dukkha khandassa samudayo hoti. This is why, monks, I have just taught you the dependent origination process. Use it wisely. Because what he's given us is a knife. You can use this knife to slice bread. You can also use this knife to slit your throat, if you're not careful. For someone who wants to attain Nibbana, what do I mean by slitting your throat? I don't mean the literal slitting your throat, clearly, because we're talking about Nibbana here. Slitting your throat, what happens to someone who slits their throat? Well, right? They're going to die. And not live to tell the tale. Not live to realize that that was a mistake. It's going to be too late for that. When someone's dead, they can no longer achieve the purpose of their lives. So likewise, in samsara, slitting your throat is like getting lost in samsara. Going after a lot of things that are really supplementary, on the periphery. These are all additional things that are really not fundamental to our attaining Nibbana. The dependent origination process can tell you if there are living creatures on Mars. Yes, it can. It can tell you if there's life in the adjacent galaxy. It can. It can tell you what is the furthest star in the Milky Way. Yes, it can. The dependent origination process can tell you all of this. The problem is, a lot of people forget to read the instruction booklet. And so what they use the dependent origination process for is to go looking for answers to all those questions. Is there a heaven? Is there a hell? Is there life after death? Was there life before this? What is the furthest star? Is there life on Mars? That's what people tend to use the dependent origination process for. Are there demons? Are there devils? Are there devas? Are there brahmanas? But people forget to read the instruction booklet. Because in the instruction booklet, the Buddha clearly said, Eva me tassa kevalassa dukkha khandassa samudaya hoti. Monks, this is how suffering comes into being. Use this instruction that I have given you. Use the dependent origination process that I have given you to bring suffering to an end. Use it for anything else, and it's akin to slicing your throat. Because you're wasting your time in samsara. Fortunately, suffering, dukkha, is something that is also dependent on various factors. Well, actually on two factors. Ignorance and attachment. Because for one who has eradicated ignorance and attachment, is there suffering any longer? We're not talking about physical suffering, as we've spoken many times before. We're talking about the mental suffering. Because what's the best cure for physical suffering? Use the knife and put it against your neck. At the end of that life, no more physical suffering. But for as long as the mind's in vexation, the mind continues to keep being reborn. And to be reborn, a body has to come in place, and therefore that is not the answer to any problem. So we're talking about how do we deal with the problem of the mind. The vexation that lies in the mind, this pelima, for those who are new. Because vexation is not a word that we use in day-to-day conversations, but I had to do a lot of work to try and find a suitable term. Vexation is the best that I could find that describes the meaning of the word pelima in Sinhala. And this pelima, or this vexation, is the result of attachment. Attachment to a conditioned world. Attach yourself to unconditioned things, no problem. There is no room for vexation there. But is there anything in this world that is unconditioned? Is there? Is there? The mind? Nibbana, yes. That's right, madam. Nibbana is the only unconditioned entity. But it would be wrong to say that it's an entity either. Because an entity exists. Where does Nibbana exist? You can't give it a place. There's no location. You can't give it a longitude and a latitude. Go here and you're going to find Nibbana. It's not a place like that. It's the extinguishing of raga, desire, the fire of desire. You put out a fire, where's the fire gone?
Where's it gone to? Where does the fire go to put out when you put out a fire? Doesn't go anywhere, does it? No, it doesn't go anywhere. When the causes cease to exist, then the result shall cease to exist. That's all it is. It's not it came from somewhere, so it has to go somewhere. That's not the case. If you were to lock all the windows and the doors of this room, bring in some firewood, provided there's oxygen in this room, give it the right temperature, you're going to start a fire. You're going to light a fire. Where did the fire come from? All the windows and the doors were locked. So it didn't come from anywhere. If it didn't come from anywhere, it's not going to go anywhere. Causes give rise to an effect. When the causes cease to exist, the effect shall cease to exist. Similarly, dukkha, this suffering that we experience, is also cause and effect. It's also conditional. Luckily, what if it wasn't? What if suffering weren't, I should say, what if suffering weren't conditioned? We'd be screwed. Because then we'd have to find somewhere else to go and put it. And also we wouldn't be able to put an end to it. Because it's just there. Something that's just there, you can't put a stop to it. Something that's not there, you can't bring it. So that's why we have to avoid the two extremes of, is it there, is it not there? And use the Buddha's teaching of cause and effect. Paticca samuppada, dependent origination. Through dependent origination, he describes, for something to originate, there are dependencies. That's why it's called the dependent origination process. But it's key that we understand that last line, that last advice he gave in the instruction booklet, eva metassa kevalassa dukkha khandassa samudayo hoti. Dukkha skandha. Dukkha khandha. What is a khandha? A mountain. So khandha it's a Pali term, it's also in Sinhala. Khandha is a mountain. Siripada khandha, right? It's a mountain. Dukkha khandha, mountains of suffering. He's not speaking of one suffering, two suffering, three suffering, four suffering. He's speaking of mountains of suffering. Heaps of suffering. Dukkha khandassa samudayo hoti. Sang udaya hoti. Udavena. They come to rise, luckily. And that's great that they arise. Because what happens to everything that arises? Passes away. Everything that arises passes away. So if suffering is also something that arises, provided that we find the causes that gave rise to it, and extinguish those causes, what happens to suffering? It passes away, never to come back again. That is what he gave the dependent origination process for. Remember last week or the week before I shared with you the time when the Buddha went into a forest and he picked up some leaves, a handful of leaves, right? And he asked the monks, which do you think is more? The number of leaves in all the trees in this forest, or the number of leaves that are in my palm? At which the monk said, Bhante, how can we even offer a simile or a number? That's impossible. The number of leaves in your palm are insignificant compared to all the leaves in all the trees in this forest. We can't even offer a simile. At which point the Buddha says, well, all the things that I know are like all the leaves in all the trees in this jungle, in this forest. The things that I have taught you, the dhammas that I have taught you, are like the number of leaves that are in my palm. In which he included the dependent origination process. Thankfully. What if he left that out? The one process that teaches us the cause for suffering and how to bring suffering to an end, had he left that out and taught us if there was life on Mars, the origin of the stars, if that's what he had chosen to teach us, where would we be today? in the maze, right? We would be still in the maze, lost in dead ends, not knowing where to go from that point. So fortunately, when he preached the Dhamma, he included the dependent origination process in that handful of leaves that he picked up. Because that is why a Buddha comes into this world, nothing else. A Buddha comes into this world to put an end, to help people understand the human problem. The human problem. The Deva problem. The Brahma problem. The problem that is universal to all sentient beings. And that is this mental problem. Mental suffering. How do we find the cause to it, and how do we bring an end to it? Because without his teaching, we just keep going round circles in samsara, trying to find different ways, trying out all sorts of different ways, but never really finding the true cause. So, let's look at this dependent origination a little bit, and see how understanding of the dependent origination process can help us to penetrate this pleasure that we all experience. How within the terms of the dependent origination process, the essence, the meaning of the dependent origination process, we can find, if we are intelligent enough, if we are clever enough, if we are careful enough, that this pleasure is nothing but a fallacy, nothing but a hologram. And behind it is just heaps and heaps, mountains of suffering. Because again, this is what the Buddha preached the dependent origination for. That instruction at the end of it is vital. We understand that and we remember that. Eva metassa kevalassa dukkha kandassa samudayo hoti. Samudayo hoti. Sang udaya. Sang is what? Ignorance and attachment. The coming together through ignorance and attachment. Sang udaya. Udavima. Arise. Something that arises due to causes will cease to exist when the causes cease to exist. So find what the causes are, treat the causes, and you will have treated the effect. You will not have to do anything additional. Let's start at ignorance. Avidya paccaya sankhara. So what our purpose here, ladies and gentlemen, is to try and find our path through the dependent origination process to help us understand how and where pleasure arises. Because, let's be honest, we all feel pressure. Pressure and pleasure. No pressure. We all feel pleasure. But the problem is, it's a hologram. It's not real. But don't take it because I say so. Because take it by faith, you haven't understood anything. See it for yourself, you have understood everything. Because after you've understood everything there is to understand, I can no longer come and change your view about that. Then your view, your right view has now been cemented. Not even I can come and say, no, that's wrong what I taught you before. If it thinks, if the penny drops, then it will be true for you. When it's true for you, it doesn't matter who else accepts it or rejects it. So let's make it true for us. Actually, before we start at avidya, I'll start at the tail end of the dependent origination process. Because what we know is we all enjoy pleasure. We experience pleasure. Put enjoying to a side, we experience pleasure. A pleasure that has come into being, jati. A pleasure, someone who experiences pleasure, someone who enjoys pleasure at this point in time, like all of us. Because what does the mind trying to do every single time? Remember baby Natasha? Always feed the baby. For what purpose? To keep the baby alive, right? What is the baby? In the example, in that metaphor that we use, in the simile that we use, what did we equate the baby to? The self. This is the self that we keep feeding. So it's the self that we want to keep fostering, feeding, bringing up and nurturing, right? And the self is also the same as pleasure world. Ashwada loke. This is what the self is. If I ask you, think about yourself for a moment, what you're going to think of is something that is pleasurable. If I ask to describe yourself, you're going to pick and choose the words that you find pleasurable. This is how I wear my hair. This is how I like to dress. This is what I like to eat. This is what I like. This is the music I like to hear. I like to listen. You're going to use words that describe pleasure. And it's through that pleasure that you experience, you're going to describe self. So self is nothing other than this pleasure world. The world of pleasure that we build within our own minds. And this is why for an Arahant there is no self. Why? Because the pleasure world has been destroyed. Is that a good thing or a bad thing? No more pleasure? Surely that must be a bad thing. No? If I were to propose to you, I'm going to show you how to stop pleasure. Who's going to sign up for that? A few of you would, but the majority won't. The reason for this is because we are unable to penetrate pleasure. Because we don't see the suffering that lies behind pleasure. We don't see the pain that was there before the gain. Remember, no pain, no gain? So these are things we've spoken of in the past. So you're going to have to go back and listen to old sermons that we did. Because I can't repeat everything in the short time that I have. Limited time that I have. So try and find some time to go back and listen to previous sermons. Because there are some nuggets of wisdom that you can pick up, which will help you to develop your understanding, so that when you come along to future sermons, it'll all start to make sense. So, baby Natasha, if I start to explain that again, that will take up the entire 2.5 hours. If I start to explain what pleasure world is, again, that's going to take up another hour. So you're going to have to go back and listen to previous sermons. Okay? So, the self that we create, this pleasure world that we create, we do so to relieve ourselves from suffering. Let us prove that to ourselves. Let us find proof of that. Because like you for a moment ago agreed with what I said, everything that arises passes away. The things that arise that pass away, is that only true for things that you find unpleasurable? Or is that true for things that you find pleasurable as well? That's universal. Whatever, if it has arisen, it's going to pass away. Whether you find it pleasurable or unpleasurable, it doesn't really matter. If it has arisen, it's going to pass away. Right? So it's not just money that you have earned that when you spend is going to pass away. It's also your headaches, backaches, stomachaches, things that you don't like. Good times pass away, bad times pass away as well. That's why people say time is a good healer. Because what's going to happen over time? It's just going to pass away. That's what's going to happen. Not that time did anything. The causes that gave rise to whatever it was that was causing you suffering, over time, they're going to lapse. They're going to pass away. This is why people say time is a good healer. So, at the end of the dependent origination process, the tail end, we have Jati Pachaya, Jara Marana Shoka Parideva Dukkha Domanassa. That which has come to birth, that which has arisen, is going to be subject to death, to old age, disease, decay. And it's going to lead to frustration, disappointment, agony, despair, all those things. That's the tail end. Now, why did I speak of the tail end to begin with? We are all in the process of self-procreation. Again, stuff we've spoken of in the past. Constantly trying to produce the self. But what happens to the self that has been produced a moment ago? It passes away. And because we are so attached to the self, and the self is nothing but this pleasure world that we have built in our minds, when it passes away, now we have to endure what? Suffering. Death, disease, decay, pain, frustration, disappointment, lamentation, horror. All these things are things that we have to experience, not see, by experience. Things we experience. When this pleasure world that we have just built has passed away. It's like building the sand castle on the beach. An example I used some weeks ago. You build a sand castle on the beach, provided you built it with sand, and provided you built it by the beach, when the waters come in, it's going to wash it away. And then it's time to suffer. But if that sand castle in that example was the self. That sand castle is the pleasure world that we have built through a lot of pain. There's been a lot of painstaking that's gone into building that. But whether you like it or not, whether you build something pleasurable or unpleasurable, when the causes cease to exist, the result will cease to exist. And when that happens to something that you are attached to, what happens now? Shoka parideva dukkha domanassa. Sorrow, lamentation, despair, destitution, all these things. And all things that we have to endure, have to experience, and we suffer. Now, at this point we can go back to the beginning of the dependent origination process. Avidya paccaya sankara. Based in ignorance, we begin formation, sankara, abhisankara. Because now that we are enduring, we are having to endure, we are having to experience the pain, the suffering of passing away, the pain and the suffering of disease, the pain and the suffering of decay and death. Through ignorance we come to the conclusion, although this was a hologram, the next one I find is going to be a real one. Although my pleasure world has just washed away, although the sand castle that I built was washed away in the water, a moment ago I was enjoying pleasure. Because it's the pleasure that you built that passed away, that got washed away. So for someone who experiences, not see, so seeing is something you do with wisdom. Experience is something you do with feeling, Vedana. One's through prajna, the other's through Vedana. Through Vedana, or feeling, sensation, you experience the pain of passing away. You also experience the pleasure of having built that pleasure world. That's why you built it in the first place. So both pleasure and suffering are things that you experience. Ashvada and Pelima, they are both things that you can experience. As well as see through wisdom. If you see through wisdom, you will begin to see the truth. But if all you do is experience through Vedana, then you're not going to be able to see the truth. You're always going to be stuck in that process, because what's going to happen when you have to experience the pain of being washed away, passing away, death and disease and decay? Well, I enjoyed a moment of pleasure just a moment ago. So surely, I'm just going to go back and build it up again. Like the kid that keeps building sand castles every time the water comes and washes it away. A moment ago, I had the sand castle. Yes, okay, the water washed it away, but what can I do now? Just go and build another one. Because when I have built it, that's pleasurable. That's something that the kid experiences, right? It's like a kid blows a balloon. A kid likes to play with balloons, picks a balloon up and blows it. So when it's really big in size, having blown into it, now he finds a lot of pleasure in this balloon. Wow, look at this, a big, huge balloon I've got for myself. And he keeps blowing into it. And at one point it's going to pop. At one point it's going to burst. It's going to pop. And then he's going to start crying. Oh, my balloon. Look what happened. Now he's frustrated, disappointed, angry, annoyed. But this kid has experienced in the past the pleasure that came out of blowing the balloon. So what's he going to do again? Blow up another balloon. Because what this kid knows is, when there's a big balloon that I've blown up, that brings me pleasure. So let me not worry about the pain. I'll just go and find pleasure again. Let me forget the fact that this was a hologram that I just put my arm out and tried to grab. Yes, that was a hologram. But when I saw the jewel from afar, that was pleasurable. So I'm going to go and look for another one again. This is what we do. This is what we've been all doing. This is your story. I'm relating. This is what we've all been doing throughout samsara that I'm relating to you. A couple bring a child into the world. At delivery, the child dies. Now the mother and father, they're in a state of despair. They're lamenting and weeping and sorrowful. But a few months, maybe a year or two later, they decide, well, when we knew that the baby was there, the baby was going to be there, that was fun, that was pleasurable, so let's just make another baby. And so they put themselves through the process once again. Why? This is all experiencing. This is the feeling that's playing the trick here. Not wisdom, Vedana. So, when the pleasure world was subject to Jara, Marna, Shoka, Parideva, Dukkha, Domanasa, through ignorance, this being, this sentient beings comes to the conclusion, well, I enjoyed pleasure a moment ago, I clearly remember that, so all I have to do now, if it's painful, let me just build that world up again. That sandcastle got washed away, let me just build another sandcastle. And so he gets to work. Through ignorance, he starts to put together a blueprint. This is what pleasure has to look like. And this process, for this process to start, there has to be an input that comes from the outside world. It will either be a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste, physical sensation, or a thought that comes into the mind. Whatever, one of these 6 inputs, because with every moment this pleasure world is arisen, is born. Every moment a pleasure world is born. With every thought moment a pleasure world is born. But the next moment it passes away. So see, this pain that we experience, we do so, ladies and gentlemen, with every thought, with every chitta that arises and passes away. On a consciousness that is based in ignorance and attachment, that is constantly striving to self-procreate, that is constantly striving to build pleasure, well, what's going to happen when that pleasure passes away? Now it's painful. So with every moment, you have to now go through the process of kick-starting this process again and again and again and again and again. Non-stop. Because through ignorance always comes the conclusion, well, there was pleasure. Yes, this passed away, that was painful, but there was pleasure. So let's start it again. And so now you have a blueprint. In other words, really, this is the conclusion that you come to. Let's build the world again. Let's self-procreate again. Let me have another baby. Let's go through that process again. Sankhara. Sankhara is nothing other than the decision to create a Sankata. Sankhara is the decision to create another Sankata. Because it was that Sankata that passed away. What is a Sankata? Conditioned things. Remember, the dependent origination process is for what? What was the instruction at the end? Eva metasa kevalasa dukkha khandasa samudaya hoti. This is how suffering is born. This is what the Buddha teaches the dependent origination process for. Again, I admit this is a little bit heavy, but try and pay attention if you possibly can, because there'll be lots of good stuff you can take away from this. Yes, madam. So I'll come to the Vijnana in a moment. This Sankhara, this is really the decision, more so than the blueprint. In fact, this is the decision. Because ignorance, although we say avidya paccaya sankhara, avidya is there constantly. The dependent origination process goes round from sankhara. Sankhara paccaya vijnana, and that's how it flows. But it's built, it runs on a platform that is called avidya. On a platform of ignorance. That is why we say avidya paccaya sankhara. So, at that point, sankhara, for which the English term is formation, a decision has been made, let me build this self again, the self that just passed away a moment ago, that was subject to jara marana, let me build it up again. The pleasure world. Self, pleasure world, all these are the same. You can use them interchangeably. Okay? The castle on the sand, all of this is the same thing. Baby Natasha, they're all the same thing, right? So, sankhara is the decision based on ignorance. I now experience the pain of having passed away a moment ago, but I also experience pleasure 2 moments ago. So what I'm going to do now is give rise to that pleasure once again. That is the decision. And that decision can only be made for as long as this process runs on the platform of ignorance. Take away ignorance, that process, that decision is never going to come there again. The decision of let me build that castle again, that decision is never going to happen again. That is the status of an arahant. Because what an arahant has done is not stop the dependent origination process. All they've done is removed avidya. And now the dependent origination process still runs, but it doesn't run on a platform of ignorance. It doesn't run on a platform of ignorance. That's why an arahatan Vahanse does not do karma. Kusala karma and papa karma. Meritorious deeds and unmeritorious deeds. An arahant does not perform these deeds. Because both these types of deeds are done to relieve one from suffering. With both these types of deeds, the sole purpose is to self-procreate, to create pleasure world. That is the purpose of doing both meritorious and unmeritorious deeds. But why create the pleasure world? To relieve from suffering. Why is there suffering? Because there's attachment. Why is there attachment? Because you're running this process on a platform of ignorance. Remove ignorance, attachment's gone. Attachment's gone, no more vexation, no more suffering. No more vexation, no more suffering, no more pleasure world. You don't take medicine to cure a problem that you don't have, right? When was the last time you took a paracetamol to cure a headache that you didn't have? If the curing of the headache is what gave you pleasure, and if it was the paracetamol that brought you that pleasure, you're not going to take paracetamol if there wasn't a headache to begin with. Likewise, if there is no vexation to treat, then you're not going to go looking for help from the outside world, which I'll come to in a moment when we go through the stages of the dependent origination process, and it will all start to make sense. So, let me go back again to the beginning. Based on a platform of ignorance, a decision has been made, yet again. What is this decision? Pleasure world passed away a moment ago, so now it's time to build me up again. Build it up again. My sand castle got washed away when the waters came along, so now it's time to build it up again. Because when I look at a sand castle, oh, it's so beautiful, so pretty. That pleasure world is so fun, so much fun, it's enjoyable, so I have to build it up again, right? So that is what happens at sankhara. Now, sankhara paccaya vijnana. At that point, remember, the Buddha says vijnana is a wizard. Vijnane mayakare. This is a wizard, a magician. And what does a magician know to do best? Perform magic. Is magic real? No. Magic is done to entertain the onlooker, to entertain the audience. But we know the magic is not real. It looks fun from the outside, but the magician knows, I'm just fooling them. This is just trickery. It's a trick of the eye. That's all magic is. So, now that a decision has been made, let me build this pleasure world up. Vijnana steps in, which is the consciousness, steps in to start to take action. This is like the contractor. A decision has been made. This is the contractor now goes to find a blueprint. Now he has to put together a blueprint. according to which this sand castle can be built, the self can be built. Because you need a structure. What does pleasure look like? What does pleasure world look like? You need a blueprint before you start building a house, right? You don't just start going put bricks together, sand together, cement, and see what might happen at the end of it. That's not how you build a house. You have a plan. According to the plan, you start building. So likewise, now the decision has been made. So you can think of Sankara as being the executive board. They have made the decision, let's do this. And now they've set a project manager or a program manager. Off you go, make this happen. So now it's the project manager or the program manager's duty to build the project, the product or the service that the steering committee or the executive board has given their blessings, their approval for, right? So I'm using various examples in the hope that you can relate to some of them at least, because you all come from different backgrounds. So you can think of it as a project manager. This is Vijnana, that's the project manager. So now the project manager has to do whatever to build this product or the service that the executive board just signed off on. Now, remember, Vijnana is a wizard. What Vijnana does, this magician does, is like a magician who performs various types of tricks. But to perform those tricks, he needs his tools. What are some of the tools that a magician uses? A hat, yes. No points for that. That's the obvious one. What else? A wand, yes. What else? Rabbit? Yes, you need a rabbit. Now, who's a magician without a rabbit? What else does a magician need? Gloves, a handkerchief, yes, perhaps a coin or two, maybe a card pack or two, right? These are some of the tools that a magician needs to perform his tricks. A pencil, a bit of paper, right? So, likewise, Vijnana, who is also a magician, needs some tools with which he's going to perform this magic now. Now, this magic has been signed off at the executive board, which is what? Sankara. Now, there's a CEO of the executive board who's completely blind. This is why he gave the order, executive board, I think you should do this. I think it's worthwhile. The executive board came together, had a chat, had a discussion over a cup of tea and decided, yes, let's go ahead and do this. It's now been signed off, passed over to the program manager, and now the program manager runs trying to find the tools that's going to help him make this happen. This is why Vijnana goes and knocks on the door of Nama Rupa. Vijnana Paccaya Nama Rupa. Nama and Rupa. Nama are all these things that we have in our memories. Memory banks. Even someone who has very short-term memory, they still have Nama in their memory banks. Right now, if you're looking at an object and you're saying that's a microphone, how do you know that? That comes from your memory banks. What if you forget the next moment you're looking at a microphone? That's still okay. The next moment you forget, you're going to wonder, what is that? But still you can see it's a physical object. Even at that very basic level, it's your memory that's helping you to identify. And not just that. When you open your eyes, all that's flooding through your eyelids, through your eyeballs, are beams of light, right? Rays of light. Now, at one moment, at one point, you can only see one dot of information. They're like pixels on a TV screen or a computer monitor. It's like these pixels. A lot of pixels come together to show you, to display an image. And likewise, when you're looking at an object through your eyes, there are individual bits of light that have gone through your retina, that have cast an image on your retina, and then now through your optic nerves, through your brain, and now leaving an imprint on your mind. But the moment that one dot appears on your mind, it puts it back into memory. And then the next moment arrives. The next dot of information arrives. Memory. The third dot of information arrives. Memory. And with every dot that appears, there is Sankara, which is one of the Panchaskandha, that does a round. It's like a round trip. Do you know what it is that you're looking at? One dot? No, don't know. Second dot? No. Third dot? No. Fourth dot? No. When does it know? When does it identify what it is that it's been looking at? After about 1 billion dots of information. So all that pulls from memory. pulling all those bits of information from memory, going a round trip, picking all those bits of information up in order that you can come to identify what is this object that you're looking at. So that was just a bit of a detour. We don't need to understand this to understand the process that I was going to explain before. So anyway, Vijnana now needs to go and tap on the door of memory to pull the nama. So these are sight, sound, smell, taste, touch, all memories, okay? And thoughts that you had in the past. Constantly bringing back data from your storage banks, from your hard drives. Bringing them to the present moment. And in the present moment, what Vijnana does is now it starts to perform its magic. Using those tools, it now puts them in various different shapes and forms. Like a pottery worker, an example I've used in the past, if you remember. You give the pottery worker some clay, some mud, or clay even. What's he going to do? He's going to mold it into various shapes. Once it might be a cup. Next time it's a flower vase. Next time it's something else entirely. Some kind of ornament, right? So the pottery worker is able to create all sorts of stuff using the same bit of clay. And likewise, Vijnana is able to create all types of rupa from the nama that was in the memory banks. That's why they call nama rupa. Ru opnangvana. So I'm going to have to use the etymology there. Ru opnangvana. Opnangvana is to give form. That's why they call name form. I think it's the English translation. Name form. And it's true to some extent, because what we do there, by name, don't think of it as being a name like Richard or Smith or Jane or, that's not the meaning there. Here, name implies all the things in the memory. Those memories that you have. Nama gotta. Memories. So brought from the past into the present moment, given shape, molded, and now that becomes the expectation for the future. Are we going to get burnt? Plugged into a surge protector? I think there's one in the lab. You might want to get it. Surge protector. So Vijnana, the wizard, went into the memory banks on the approval of the executive board, that was Sankara. What did he do? Brought memories from the past, figments of memory, fragments of memory, brought from the past into the present moment to then make a mold. This is a shape. Have you listened to the sermon which was, what was it titled? Ferrari in a Pentagon? No, you're going to have to go back and listen to it. Because there we describe what Nama Rupa is in a lot of detail. So this is why I say, listen to previous sermons, because that will give you a good foundation so that we can continue in sermons in future. So, bringing memories from the past, it's now giving them shape, molding them to create expectation. This is what it's creating. A really interesting point here that we all need to try and understand. What is pleasure again? What is pleasure? How do we define pleasure? Relief from suffering. What is expectation? Is expectation a good feeling or a feeling of uneasiness? Uneasiness. Isn't that how you feel expectation? When someone gives you an expectation. Now, until that expectation has been fulfilled, do you feel easy or do you feel uneasy? Uneasy, right? This is the expectation that has now been produced. This is what Vijnana did. Created the expectation. using the memories from the past, in the present moment, build an expectation for the future. Now, if you're telling me that pleasure is relief from suffering or uneasiness, I'm going to use that word here, pleasure is relief from uneasiness, then you have just built yourself an expectation. Are you in a state of ease or in a state of uneasiness? In a state of uneasiness. So, do you not see now that there's a path for you to enjoy pleasure in a few moments' time if all goes well? Because you have just created an expectation. If that expectation gets fulfilled, now you will relieve yourself from the uneasiness, leaving you with what? Pleasure. What if that expectation does not get fulfilled? Now, suffering. So do you see how, when we are in the process of trying to create pleasure, you have to start with disappointment. You have to start with uneasiness. You have to start with setting an expectation. Because without that expectation, how are you going to achieve pleasure? You have to start with uneasiness to eventually land at pleasure. Do you begin to see the suffering that lies behind the veil? So let's continue, and it will all start to make sense eventually. Vijnana Pacca Nama Rupa. So now this Nama Rupa, Ru Opnangana, according to the Nama. Opnangana you can take as Ona Vidhira Pavattana. Sorry to use Sinhala to our online listeners, but I'm really trying to get the feeling across to you. Ona Vidhira Pavattana. According to the, what do you mean by Ona Vidhira? As per the instruction. As was advised by whom? The executive board. Because that's how the project manager has to run this project. According to the advice, the instructions of the executive board. So, Ona Vidhira. Kage Ona Vidhira? The executive board. That's what Sankara decided. This is how it's going to be. Now, what Vijnana is doing is, according to the instructions of the executive board, creating this expectation. And the moment at which expectation now has been built, this mind is in a state of unease. Why? An expectation has been built. It's like someone says, a friend or a loved one will be visiting you shortly. Isn't that expectation? And if it's someone you're really looking forward to see, are you now in a state of ease or unease? Someone you really like, someone you really love will be visiting you shortly. Or you can expect a call from someone that you really like shortly. State of ease or state of unease? Unease. You're in a state of unease, which is why when the call arrives, now you feel pleasure. Because you have just been relieved from that state of unease. If that state of unease wasn't there to begin with, would you have felt the pleasure? No. So to really enjoy pleasure, suffering is fundamental. It's an intricate part. They come in pairs. You can't buy one and say no to the other. This is a package. It comes as a package. If you want pleasure, you also have to sign up for what? Suffering. You can't just take the pleasure and say, no, I don't want the suffering. Well, then you can't have the pleasure either. That's how it comes. Remember some time ago I asked you a question? Who here does not like suffering? Put your hand up if you don't like suffering. If you don't like suffering, put your hand up. Don't lie. Because without suffering, how can you enjoy pleasure? Do you get my point? Without suffering, how can you enjoy pleasure? So if you're saying you like pleasure, then you have to say, well, I'm going to have to say yes to suffering as well. Because without the suffering, no pleasure. So now you have built this expectation, which is where Vijnana Pacca Nama Rupa is the magician, the wizard that built this expectation for the future. Now it awaits for the outside world to bring pleasure. So the last week and several weeks we've been discussing this. Where does someone who is ignorant expect pleasure to come from? The outside world, right? Beautiful flowers, pleasurable, right? So pleasure exists in the outside world. Pleasure exists in the sounds, in the taste, in the smells, in the touch that has to come from the outside world. Says someone who suffers from what? Ignorance. Remember, this is a dependent origination process that is running on the platform of ignorance. So constantly there's ignorance. Ignorance is constantly feeding this process. So now, expectation has been built. It's awaiting pleasure to come from the outside world. Now, how does your mind communicate with the outside world? What does it need? Absolutely, yes. The senses. The eyes, the nose, the ears, the tongue, the body, well, and the mind as well. Again, dhammas that come to the mind can also be considered coming from the outside world. We'll leave that for a moment. If that can become a little bit more confusing, let's leave that for a moment. Let's take the 5 senses. Eyes, ears, nose, tongue, and the physical body, through which you feel physical sensations. Now let Dasahandru worry about that. You pay attention, because this is important. Because once you see this, you will have been able to penetrate pleasure. And once you've seen that, you will no longer have to keep coming back to listen to sermons. Isn't that great? You can do something else, something better on a Sunday evening. Something more fun. Don't have to come to sermons. Woohoo! So, expectation has been created, and now, if pleasure exists in the outside world, and this is the conclusion that has been come to by a mind that suffers from ignorance. Now, this thought process has to open the 5 senses in the search for pleasure, seeking pleasure from the outside world. Vijnana pacca namarupa, namarupa pacca salayatana. Not indriya, not faculties. Salayatana, ayatana. I like to use the word institutes. I don't know if you'll find it in textbooks, but I shall use that word nevertheless. Institutes, because what do you do in an institute? You produce a product or a service. That's what you do in an institute. You do something, you render a service, you create a product or a service, right? That's what you do in an institute. That's why Indriya and Ayatana are not one and the same word. Now, before this order came through, there were project workers who were just there having a cup of tea, just, relaxing or chillaxing. Just doing their own thing. But there was no project manager to coordinate them. So they were just doing their own thing. But now comes the project manager and says, here's the project draft. Here's the project plan. Now we have to go execute. All on your feet. Let's get to work. So now the workers, they have to go and execute. Do what they can do to help create what? Pleasure world. Because that is what this blueprint is for. So because pleasure exists in the outside world, who says so? A mind that is based in ignorance says so. Pleasure exists in the outside world. Now the eyes open. But it's no longer a faculty. Now it's an institute. This eye is now open to bring in sights in the hope that it's pleasure that is coming through these eyes. That is the belief that it now has. It's pleasure. Open your eyes, look, that's pleasure. Open your ears, listen, that's pleasure. Nose, smell, pleasure. Tongue, taste, pleasure. Body, touch, pleasure. So looking for pleasure from the outside world. To do what? Build the self. These are the bricks, these are the stones, this is the cement that helps to build the sandcastle. So the workers are your eyes, your nose, your tongue, your ears, and your body, who's gone out to bring pleasure from the outside world, so it can build this pleasure world. Namarupa pacca salayatana. Salayatana pacca Phassa. Phassa is contact. So what happens now? The eyes have been opened, so I'll use the example of looking at something, and you can connect that to all the other senses as well. Eyes are now open, expecting pleasure to come from the outside world, but we do know now that pleasure does not exist in the outside world, right? Pleasure is nothing other than relief from suffering. But through ignorance, we come to think that pleasure exists in the outside world. This is why the eye is now open, to bring pleasure from the outside world. Remember, this whole project is running on ignorance. This entire project is based on ignorance. This is why the eyes were open, to bring pleasure from the outside world. So now what the eye does is bring in that sight, and now it goes and leaves a sense impression on the mind. But this sense impression is being received through ignorance and attachment. That's why it's not just any old phassa. It's sampassa. Sang again is ignorance and attachment. The whole purpose of bringing these inputs from the outside world is so that pleasure world can be built in the mind. Are you with me so far? Is there anything that's not clear? You can put your hand up and ask a question. If not, and I'll explain it before we move further. Madam? Okay. An indriya or a faculty, the eye, its purpose is simply to bring sights from the outside world. Nothing else. But an institute or an ayatana, it has a purpose. And that purpose is to produce something that has been pre-planned. Okay, so in an institute you do a job, you produce something that is pre-planned. So according to that instruction you go ahead and you work. But the eye is not for that. It's just there to bring sights from the outside world. So if I were to give you an example, let's take a radio. A radio has an antenna, and the purpose of the antenna is to receive any old radio signals that are in the spectrum, right? In the air, any old airwaves it's going to pick up. But if there's a particular radio station you want to listen to, now you have to tune the radio. When you are tuning the radio, now you're not prepared to listen to any old radio waves. Now you are fixed on one particular frequency. You are looking for a particular frequency. This is why you have tuned the radio. So the tuning is something you do to the radio. The antenna, all the antenna does is just pick up radio waves from the outside. It's not the antenna you're tuning, by the way. You're tuning the receiver on the radio. All the antenna is doing is picking up radio waves from the outside world, and it's feeding all these radio waves to the receiver that's on the radio. And then the radio is now filtering out all the other frequencies and just picking up the right frequency. So likewise, the eye is always an eye. The only thing that I can do is take light that comes from the outside world. Just because it's now an institute doesn't mean it's going to take ultraviolet all of a sudden. That's not how it works. It's just light then, now, and in the future. It's always going to be light. But what becomes an institute is really not this eye. It's not this muscular eye that becomes an institute. It's the mind. The mind which has now focused its attention on the eye. That is where the institute is born. Because remember, when someone becomes an arahat, they no longer have institutes. They're simply faculties, right? Just indriya. But did the eye change? No, an arahant never got a new eye. You know, someone who's an anagami, in 10 seconds they're going to become an arahant. You're not going to find dwarfs or smurfs coming around with bags full of ice here. You know, why don't you have some arahant ice? You're going to become an arahant in a moment. That's not how it happens. It's the same eye. So it's not the eye that changes. It's the receiver on the radio. So the receiver is the mind, because it's on the mind that the eye leaves that sense impression. It's the way that the mind receives this. When it's just a faculty, the mind is willing to receive any sight that comes from the eye. But when it's a faculty, when it's an institute, when it's an ayatana, now it has a plan. It has a plan. It's been pre-programmed. I'm not willing to accept any old, whatever you have to bring. I have a plan, and please bring me only what I have asked for. Expecting what you like from a world that is not to your liking. See? Setting expectations on a world that is anicca, that is not to one's liking. This is where it all starts. Did you have a question, sir? Gentleman in glasses, did you have a question? Okay. So all good so far? Is the question answer clear? Okay. So Vijnana Paccaya Nama Rupa, Nama Rupa Paccaya Salayatana. Now Salayatana includes the sign in the word indicates 6. 6 because eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body and the mind. The 6 faculties which are transformed to institutes in order to receive what it's expecting, not whatever you can give me. I'm here to receive what I'm expecting from you. Okay? Salayatana Paccaya Passa. So again, it's not just any old passa. Passa is something that happens to a faculty. Sampassa is what happens with an institute, with an ayatana. So Salayatana Paccaya Sampassa. Now, Passa Paccaya Vedana. So what's happening now is the eye is open, sights being taken in from the eye, and a sense impression being left on the mind. So the mind is now filtering through what comes through from the eye, and it's taking the things that it likes. Having given the order to the eye, go, fetch me what I asked for. Having given an order to the ear, go, fetch me what I asked for. I'm trying to build pleasure here, go and bring pleasure from the outside world, because pleasure exists in the outside world. So he thinks. Because that's the only way the mind can interact with the outside world. The mind can't go bring sights. The mind needs the eyes to go bring sights. Remember when we were talking baby Natasha, the mother never left home. To feed the baby, the mother asked the father to go buy food and clothes and toys for the baby, right? Remember? But until the baby was born, the father did not have to do any of these things. He was free to read the newspaper, watch TV, put his feet up and just have a good time and relax at home. But as soon as the mother thought that she had a child, now the father was expected to go shopping, expected to bathe and wash the child, go buy toys, buy clothes, all these things. Just like faculties are there all the time, but the moment that this project plan has now come into the picture, you can't just bring me any old sights and sounds and smells and tastes. I have a pre-programmed agenda, so please bring me what I asked for. And that's where sampassa happens. And then now, here's the next step. Because there's a model that the mind has, this model that was built at the stage where Vijnana Paccaya Nama Rupa. Remember the model that was built? When Vijnana Paccaya Nama Rupa happened, going into the memory, bringing all those memories from the past and bringing an expectation for the future. So model, expectation, they're all the same things. You can use them interchangeably. Okay, let's take expectation. So now you have an expectation. Let's say expectation of a particular sight that you're wishing to look at, wishing to see. You send the eye on an errand, go and bring me a sight that I want to look at. The eye brought you the sight that it could pick up and offloads it at the mind. Now the mind gets to work. What the mind does now is, here's my expectation, here's what you brought me, let's see how well these two compare. Now it's trying to compare these two. If these two fit by coincidence, not because that's what the mind wanted, by coincidence, if these two fit, now you have Passa Paccaya Sukha Vedana. This is where pleasurable feeling comes from. If they don't fit, now it's Passa Paccaya Dukkha Vedana. I'll come to Upeksha later on. Let's follow this track for now. If you go to a shoe store to buy shoes. Now your foot is a particular size. Your foot doesn't grow depending on what shoe size the shopkeeper brings you. He's going to have to find the right shoe to fit your shoe size. So if you go in with a particular shoe size, let's say you're a size 8. Now if the shoe that's brought is a size 8, well, great. What if it's a size 9 or a size 7? Not so great. Why? Because you have a model. You have a particular size for which you are looking for a fit. You're looking for a shoe from the outside world. You're not willing to change your foot size. You're keeping your foot size. I'm going to stick to my foot size. You bring me a shoe that fits. The easier thing to do would be, bring me whatever shoe you have and I'll change my foot size to fit. But unfortunately you can't do that. With your body you can't do that. But with your mind, of course. If you're wise, if you're clever, you can do that. You can change. You can be flexible to fit whatever the circumstance is. Today you have to eat, and there's no salt. The food is saltless. How willing are you to eat that? Is your body asking for salt, or is it your mind that's asking for salt in your food? It's the mind. You sit down to watch TV. Power cut. Now, is your eyes asking to watch TV, or is it your mind asking to watch TV? It's your mind asking to watch TV. Is your mind the same as your foot? Unwilling to be flexible? Unwilling to grow to fit to size? Your body can't change size, but your mind can. But the problem is when you are unflexible or inflexible, which is the right term, can't remember. Inflexible? Inflexible, thank you. When your mind is inflexible, now you're not willing to change. I have a particular agenda, this is my program, this is my plan, and what you bring has to fit. When it fits, not because you wanted it to, not because you like or dislike, cause and effect. Remember, this world is anicca. Every sight, sound, smell, taste, all of that is cause and effect. The reason that this sight is now in front of my eye, ladies and gentlemen, is because this is a vipaka of previous karma. It's the previous karmas that bring a sight in front of your eyes. You with me? Being able to look at a sight or being able to see a sight is a vipaka. That's not a karma. So this sight being brought in front of my eyes is a vipaka. The vipaka is the result of a karma. That was the cause, this is the effect. So the reason that I can see this sight right now is because there are causes that give this effect. Is it because I like to see this right now? Is it because I don't like to see this right now? Neither. It's because there are causes that give rise to this effect. So whether you find a match or not, is that because you like to or you don't like to? Cause and effect. There are causes which brought that effect. Your eye looking at that particular sight at that point in time, that was the effect of causes. Not because you wanted it or you didn't want it. 3 plus 3 equals 6 because you like it to be so, madam, right? Or is it because you don't like it to be 8? No, 3 plus 3 is 6. That's just the way it is. Doesn't matter whether you like it or you don't like it. No one comes and asks you, I've got 3 plus 3, what would you like it to be? It's just 6. Because when the causes are there, that's the result, that's the effect you get. Whether we like it or we don't like it is immaterial. Has no bearing on what the result is. And likewise, what the vipaka is that comes in front of the eye, that is cause and effect. It's not because you like it to be there or you don't like it to be there. You don't need to think a lot to know that is true. I mean, look at all the sights that sometimes, you don't like to see, but they come in front of you. Things that you don't like to hear, but you get to hear them. Tastes that you don't like, but you feel them. You can taste them. Smells that you don't like. Foul smells, but still you smell them. Not because you don't like them, but then the same would apply the other way as well. There are some sights that you like to see. You're not seeing them because you like them, because if it's the case, then the other has to be the case as well. It can't be one this way and the other that way. They both have to be universally true. Okay? So, when you have that expectation, and your institutes have gone out and brought in sights and sounds and smells and tastes, and left those sense impressions on the mind, that was a sampassa bit. Now, passapaccaya vedana, this vedana becomes a sappa vedana, or a pleasurable feeling, or a displeasurable feeling, depending on what your expectation was. That is what determines whether you enjoy that experience or you don't enjoy that experience. Whether it brings you pleasure or pain is dependent not on what came in. It's dependent on what your expectation was. If your expectation was such, or was one, and what you received was a fit. Now, remember, expectation was an uneasy feeling, and you all said so. When I asked you, Vijnana Paccaya Namarupa, was that a pleasure, an easy or an uneasy feeling? And you all said that was an uneasy feeling. Well, guess what? At the point where you are now experiencing that passa, sampassa, where your eye has just gone out and brought in a sight, and that now perfectly fits your expectation, your uneasiness is being relieved. A mind that is ignorant comes to the conclusion, it was the sight that brought me pleasure. Foolish, right? Expectation was fulfilled, therefore uneasiness was relieved, therefore you enjoy pleasure. Not because it was the sight that brought you pleasure. Because sights don't have pleasure in them. How can they bring you something they don't have? Ever heard of Santa Claus delivering pizzas? No, Santa doesn't deliver pizza. Santa delivers gifts. Because Santa doesn't have pizzas to deliver. So sights don't have pleasure to bring you pleasure. This pleasure that you experience right now is nothing other than relief from the uneasiness that came out of the expectation that you set at the beginning of that process. Now where it brought you pleasurable feeling, what we do is attach. I enjoy that. That's fun. That was pleasurable. Let's go and attach. You can't stop yourself from attaching at that point. You can't break the dependent origination process at attachment. Because if that was pleasurable, remember, it was pleasurable because you started running this process on a platform of ignorance. And the very ignorance that told you happiness exists in the outside world. Well, now, that mindset that the ignorance was in is being proved. To an ignorant mind, the conclusion that was come to through ignorance is now being proved. Right? Because what did ignorance say? Pleasures in the outside world. Let's say ignorance and you are having a debate. Ignorance says pleasures in the outside world. You say, no, it can't be so. Ignorance says, yes, pleasures in the outside world. You say, no, it can't be so. Prove it. You say. Ignorance says, alright, what would you like to see? I'd like to see a yellow flower. And ignorance says, alright, give me a moment. Eye open. Eyes open. In front is a yellow flower. Now you see the yellow flower. Because you wanted a yellow flower, you wanted to see a yellow flower, now you are seeing a yellow flower. And now you say, oh, yellow flower. See, I told you. Isn't that beautiful? It's beautiful. See, I told you, beauty exists in the outside world. Ignorance is able to prove itself. Because we are running on a platform of ignorance. This is why you need wisdom. Even when you are seeing something through ignorance, to stand up and say, no, what you are seeing right now, that is wrong. If you are looking through colored glasses, and what you are seeing is the entire world is the color of the glasses, you need wisdom to know that, no, that is not true. I'm only seeing the world in color because I'm wearing colored glasses. You need wisdom for that. To remove those colored glasses and to begin to see the world in color, you need wisdom for that. Because until you use wisdom, you're going to continue to agree with the conclusion that ignorance gave you, which is, you see, beauty lies in the flower. So beauty lies in sights. Pleasure lies in sights. So let's continue looking at them. So Vedana Pachya Sukha Pasa Pachya Vedana. And then Vedana Pachya Tanha. Tanha Pachya Upadana. So where Tanha, there was attachment. Now you're attached to the outside world. Why? What is the conclusion we've come to through ignorance? It's the outside world that brought us pleasure. That brought me pleasure. What are we ignorant of? What brought pleasure? Release from? Expectation. The uneasiness that we built for ourselves by setting an expectation, that has now been relieved. Forgetting all that, we think it was the flower that brought me pleasure. It was the sight that brought me pleasure. So now you're attached to the outside world. To sight, sound, smell, taste, touch and thoughts. Now we are attached. Well, if they bring me pleasure, then surely you should attach yourself to them. There's no question there. And once you're attached, now Tanha Pachya Upadana, which is clinging. Because attaching is one thing, but when you cling, now it's mine. Attachment is like just touching this. Clinging, that's all mine now. You cannot have it. It's now mine. It's wanting to continue to associate that. In the ignorance that this object, I'm just going to use this object as an example. In the ignorance that this object brought me pleasure, if pleasure is what I seek, and if this has pleasure, what should I do from this point forward? Continue to associate this object. Isn't that why you associate your good friends? They bring you pleasure, right? Do they? Why do you like to be around and hang around your best friend? Because they bring you pleasure. That's upadana. First there was attachment. That brings pleasure. I can see that. I enjoy that. It was that decision. Yes, that brought me pleasure. Now you want to continue your association with that object, person, incident, event, whatever. That's where upadana happens. Now once you've gone into upadana, then upadana pachya bhava, which is your entire existence. Now we are speaking of every thought moment here, by the way. You can speak, you can go macro or you can go micro. Whatever level, it's always dependent on origination that you can look at this. At the micro level, that chitta, that thought that arose at that point in time, its very existence is defined by the clinging that it has, the attachment that it has to that particular object, person, event, whatever. Its very existence is defined by it. So what has come into existence is someone that is seeking pleasure through looking at a sight. Ashwadadena rupa balana bhava. Sorry to use Sinhala again. I'm really struggling here. I want to try and get across the feeling, but I don't know whether it's sinking within your minds. Please tell me if what I'm trying to explain here doesn't make sense, and I'm happy to go over it any number of times until it makes sense. So existence, at that point in time, that thought moment, the very existence is now defined by the fact that the purpose of that existence is to seek pleasure from that particular object to which that thought is attached. Because it's a thought that's attached, not a person. Where's a person? There's no person. It's a thought that's attached. It's a thought that's attached to that very object through which it's trying to build this pleasure world. That's the existence. And through existence, bhavapacchaya jati, there is a being. Again, being is not a person that we speak of here. What has come into being, let's put it that way. What has come into being, it's like baking a cake actually. To give you an example. When you've put together all the ingredients of the cake, and now you put the cake in the oven, you switch on the oven, until you're prepared to pull the cake out and you go, now that is a cake, the duration between putting the cake into the oven and letting the cake bake, all of that is bhava. Because it's going through the process of giving rise to a cake. You've put in all the factors now, all that's required is heat. And what needs to happen at the molecular level for those ingredients to, heat up and then for that cake to form. And that has to happen in the oven. So, coming into existence is a process that is happening inside the oven. Coming into existence is a process that's happening inside the oven. So give it enough time. Well, and you'll know this. When you bake a cake, what do you do? From time to time, you open the dough, pull it out and check if the cake is made, right? If it's now good enough to take out of the oven. But if it's not ready, what do? Put it back. And then leave it for a few more minutes. And then again you check it. And then put it back again. Until you're happy that the cake is to your liking. So likewise, once you put these ingredients into the oven, now it's in the process of becoming. Cake bhava. You can apply this to anything. And then eventually, given enough time, you're now going to get cake jati. Now the cake has become what? A cake. Because I don't know what the term is for a cake that has not yet become a cake. It's the flour, the sugar, all that stuff that you put in for the cake to be formed. That, those ingredients go through the process of becoming, and eventually it goes into a state of being a what? A cake. Likewise, this thought that was attached to a particular object, seeking pleasure from that object in order to create pleasure land, pleasure world, went through all these steps in the dependent origination process. It would attach itself and then went and continued to associate itself with that object, went into upadana, and then from that point forward, it's now, this castle is now being built. This castle is now being built such that you can become king. Because to become king, you need a castle. The moment the last brick goes on the castle and the flag gets posted, now you have your castle. That is where castle jati has been born. That is where ashvada jati, pleasure world, has been born. Now, I understand that is a little bit heavy. I think if we can just take away what I'm about to tell you now, that is enough. If we are able to understand that pleasure was only experienced because an expectation was set, and that expectation was fulfilled. And when that expectation was fulfilled, the uneasiness that was produced, that uneasiness that was felt at the moment expectation was planted, the seed of expectation was planted, that uneasiness was relieved, and that's where pleasure was felt. If you're able to understand that bit, and that's enough. That's enough of a takeaway from that discussion. Because this is what we need to be able to see. Question, sir? So if it doesn't match, then Vedana Pacha, not Tanha, Patiga. Patigha. Ga is gatim, friction, conflict. Pati is again bandim. Pati is belt, right? To attach. Now you're attached to conflict. Give me a moment. You're attached to conflict. Why attached to conflict? Because what is this doing to you right now? Exactly. You're trying to build a pleasure world, and along comes some saboteurs who are trying to destroy this, who are trying to stop you from making pleasure world. So now you're attached to getting into conflict with those saboteurs so you can continue to build your pleasure world. That's why it's patigha. That's why it's patigha. Not just ga. It's patigha. Again, attachment to conflict. You're attached to conflict. Now you're prepared to fight. I'm willing to fight. I'm willing to rebel. To do what? So I can continue building my pleasure world. And then patigapacya adimokha. That is a resolve, a firm determination. So in upadana, what happened was close association, right? With upadana, when it was tanha pacha upadana, there was attachment, and then from that point, if it was the object that brought me pleasure, then to continue my enjoying pleasure, what I ought to do is to go and continue my association with that object that brought me pleasure. Remember, it's a consciousness that's based in ignorance that's giving us this conclusion, because pleasure never exists in the outside world. See where it's all going wrong? Right from the start, this was going astray. It's like a stray dog, this mind. Completely going astray. Thinking that it's the object that brings me happiness. So that's what happened when it was Vedana Pacha Tanha, where it was happiness, pleasurable Vedana. So when it was unpleasurable Vedana, Dukkha Vedana, then it was Patiga. Now I'm willing to fight. I'm happy to fight. Come on, bring it on. I'm game. Ready, let's fight. Why? Because you're taking away my happiness. I'm trying to build my sandcastle, and the water's coming and washing it away. Who do I fight with? The water. Because what do I think now? The sandcastle brings me happiness, and the water brings me unhappiness. The problem's where? Outside world. And so therefore, patigapacya adimokha, which is now a firm resolve, a firm determination to win this battle. I will not give up until I have beaten my enemy. Now it's a firm resolve. I will somehow or the other eliminate whatever it is that is getting in my way to building my pleasure land. And then again, adimokha pacha bhava. Bhava pacha jati. Again, now you go into a state of being of someone who is rebelling, someone who is in conflict. So when I say someone, please use these words carefully. We're speaking of a thought. Every chitta this happens, right? So it's not a someone, but when I use the word someone, it's easier for you to relate to it. So this is a thought that's getting into conflict because it's trying to create pleasure world, but the outside world is not letting it do it. Oh boy. And then finally, becoming goes into a state of being. Now what has arisen is a thought whose purpose was to initially create pleasure world, but along the way the outside world stopped it from doing that, and now it's in a state of conflict. So with the next thought that arises from this point forward, it's now, let's get to battle, let's get to war. Because whatever that's coming in my way, whatever is getting in my way to building building my castle, I'm not going to let you do that. So let's fight. Until, again, eventually there's going to be a moment where Vedana Pachya, Passa Pachya, Sukha Vedana. And then, right, okay, we are back to business. Did you have a question, sir? Any what, sorry? Okay. So if you see something that's not in your memory banks, and we'll have experienced that plenty of times. The first time you opened your eyes and you saw a woman that was holding you in her arms. You didn't know who that was. Eventually you found out. Right? So what happens is, your eyes are still able to see color. It will pick up color. Your ears will pick up sounds, or even noises, if you want to call it that. But it's not going to pick up a song. Your eyes will not pick. Your eyes never picked up. Your ears never picked up songs or music. All it picked up was sound anyway. Your eyes never picked up flowers or trees or birds or bees. All it picked up was sights and colors, right? And that's all it can ever do. It's never going to change. But what can happen is, if the mind has not experienced this before, now the mind goes into a state of vexation. Now the mind is suffering again. What is this that I'm just looking at? Remember, I think in a previous sermon many months ago, I asked you, when you go visit a friend on their birthday, what do you normally take them? A present, right? What do you do to the present before you give it to them? Wrap it up. You think that's nice? You think you're being a friend by doing that? That is one of the most evil things you can do to a friend. Because what happens when you wrap something up in wrapping paper? Now you put them into a state of expectation. Now they're constantly suffering. What might it be? Oh, what might it be? The shape of it tells me that it might be that, but when I shake it, I get a different kind of sound. Oh, it must be something else. Oh, please relieve me from this suffering. If you've eaten, why don't you go already? That's why I think in the Western world, that's not how they handle presents. You got to unwrap it the moment it gets handed to you. I think that's the right way to go about it. Why leave that poor soul in such a state of suffering? Because if they don't have a way to redeem themselves from suffering, if someone doesn't understand that it's expectation, that it's attachment that leads to suffering, then why keep the poor soul in suffering? Now that's not to say don't wrap your presents up before you give to your friends. But it's something to think about. This is why we wrap them up. See, the reason you wrap them up is to give them that promise, that expectation. Now when you hand that gift to the other person, you might think, oh, this is worthless. I don't know if they're going to like what I'm giving to them. But they're going to like it until they open the present. Until the wrapping paper comes off, they're going to love it. Why? Because now what's in there is what's in their mind, not what you brought them. It could be a brick, for all you know. But to them, it's whatever is in their mind. Because they have created pleasure world, just looking at what you have in your hand. So what happens then, to answer your question, Pata, is when you see a sight that you don't know, your mind goes into a state of vexation. Because what is the mind always trying to do? What does the executive board always issue orders to do? Build what? Pleasure. To build pleasure land, well, you have to know what pleasure land looks like. You can't just go and build any old thing. You need to know what pleasure land looks like. To know what pleasure land looks like, you need to know what nama you have in your memory banks, so that you can then shape them up. You need to know what kind of clay you are working with, so you can mold your items, mold the things that you are trying to work on. So if you don't know them, now you're in a state of vexation. Now you're suffering to know them, to get to know them. So now what you do is the mind constantly goes into a state of vexation, wondering, what might it be? What might it be? How can I use this to build my pleasure land? This is why when you open those gifts, remove the wrapping paper. Isn't there always a feeling of pleasure when you do that? When you unwrap gifts, a really subtle feeling of pleasure. Not knowing what the gift is, unwrapping it to find out what it is. Because it might be that you either like it or you don't like it. But that's the future. I'm talking about the present moment when you're unwrapping it to find out what it is. Getting to know what it is. Later on you can decide whether you like it or not. But just getting to know what that object is, doesn't that relieve you? Again, trying to build pleasure land can only happen if there's expectation beforehand, and the uneasiness that comes with the expectation. Pleasure was never there where there was no expectation. There always has to be expectation. With expectation comes uneasiness. That feeling of vexation, that pelima. I have to know what it is. Remember I said pelima, pahe ellima. That was the etymology. What paha? Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana. Now you hang yourself on it, and now you have to be able to make use of it. You want to know what this is. So now you go into this state of suffering. It's like with any object that comes into your mind. That's why I refer to the pentagon. Ferrari in a pentagon. The reason I use the pentagon to explain that is because there are 5 sides to a pentagon. That's why it's called a pentagon. Genius. And the 5 sides are Rupa, Vedana, Sanya, Sankara, Vijnana. So when you look at an object, if you don't know what it is, now when you come to filling that box which is labeled Sanya, you're going to get stuck. I don't know what it is called. Any of these 5 boxes, if you can't fill them, that's a state of vexation. Because what must the mind need? What does the mind need to produce ashvada? To produce that moment of pleasure? It needs all 5, right? So if at least one of these boxes are empty, now it can't build that moment of pleasure. You can't build that castle because there's one type of raw material missing. If it needs sand and brick and stone and water and cement, let's say you need all those 5 things. It's no good just having water and sand and brick and whatever if you don't have the 5th thing. You need all 5. So as soon as a thought objects come, so you look at an object, open your eyes, now you can see it. The first thought that goes is a vipaka chitta. Actually, something I did yesterday I thought, let me just go and do some studying, and I turned the pages of one of the Abhidhamma books just to prove a point. And I'm glad that I found what I was looking for. Again, expectation. And I was relieved from that. Because I've been trying to prove this point to you, ladies and gentlemen, that beauty does not lie in the outside object, right? Happiness does not lie in the outside object. It never did, it never does, and it never will. And I was able to prove that in the Abhidhamma. Because seeing is something that happens as a vipaka. Looking is the karma. Now, if happiness exists in the outside object, let's take this flower for an example. Seeing the flower is a karma or a vipaka? It's a vipaka. Looking at the flower, that's a karma. Seeing the flower is a vipaka. Now, if happiness does not exist in the flower, then a vipaka chitta can never have sapa or dukha vedana. Can it? Can it? No. Because if seeing is a vipaka, and your seeing a flower is something that happens as a result of a vipaka, and if happiness does not exist, sukha or dukha vedana does not exist in the flower, then a vipaka chitta through which you see a flower cannot have sapa vedana and dukha vedana in it. Well, either or, it cannot have it. Because with every chitta there are 7 chaitasikas, which are can't remember the English term now. Mental factors. There are 7 mental factors which are universal. Sanya, Chetana, Ekaggata, Jivitendriya, Manasikara, and Sanya, Chetana, Vedana, Jivitendriya, Manasikara. I can't remember the other 2. I don't study Abhidhamma a lot. I just wanted to prove that point to you, which is why I went and turned the pages. Next week I'll tell you what the other 2 are. So one of these mental factors is Vedana. And Vedana is either Sapa Vedana, Dukha Vedana or Upeksha Vedana. Okay? If a Vipaka Chitta is with which we see something, not look at something, see something, then the object has to have happiness in order for a Vipaka Chitta to bring Sapa or Dukha Vedana. But if you refer to the Abhidhamma text, what the Buddha very clearly said is Vipaka Chittas do not have Sapa or Dukha Vedana. They're all Upeksha Sahagata. Vipaka Chitta. Upeksha Sahagata. Equanimous. Neither happy nor unhappy. Which proves the point that the outside object cannot bring happiness. But every karma chitta can have sapa, dukha, or upeksha. Karma chittas can have sapa, dukha, or upeksha. So that proves the point that it's when you look at something that you see beauty in it, not when you see it. It's when you listen to a sound, you can say, that's beautiful, not when you hear it. So, once we understand this, now you don't need to go to the Abhidhamma for that. I'll refer to the text again just to confirm what the other 2 mental factors was. Just coming back to what we were talking about. Remember what the Buddha said. The reason that beings go through samsara is because they are unable to penetrate the veil of pleasure. Because pleasure we all experience. We feel and experience pleasure, but not see what pleasure really is. Without seeing what pleasure is, through wisdom, you're continually going to attach yourself to it. Because all you will know is, I experience pain and I experience pleasure. There's pain again and then there's pleasure again. Pain, pleasure. Until you one day see that this pleasure is nothing other than relief from pain in the first place. And then you realize, well, where is the pleasure? It's just pain, and more pain. Suffering, and just more suffering. A couple of weeks ago, I remember I asked you the question, did you ever go to a salon and ask for a loaf of bread? And you all said, no, you didn't. You've never done that, and you never will do that, right? And that's because salons don't sell bread. Not because it's rude to go to a salon and ask for bread. Not because someone might see and someone might think bad of you. That's not why you don't go to a salon and ask for bread. It's because there's no bread in a salon. So there's no beauty in a flower. So why look at a flower and say, give me beauty? The flower doesn't have it. How can it give it? And that's when I try to explain to you. What we must be frustrated in is not that pleasure was the relief from suffering. Yes, that is a problem. I accept. Also, pleasure that arose will pass away in a moment and that will leave you in a state of pain. Yes, I accept. But then one might think, well, that's the past, here's the future you're talking about. What about the present? The present moment where I enjoy pleasure? How can you say, I ought to be frustrated in the moment of pleasure that I experience now? The example I gave you was a man works really, really hard and he earns himself a lot of money. Is it fair for us to go and say, hey, mister, you had to work very hard to earn this money. Therefore, throw it all away. You had to work really hard for it. So don't keep hold of this money. Throw it away. Because you had to work hard for it. You didn't enjoy working hard for it, did you? No, I didn't. Therefore, throw this money away. Would he throw it away? No. In fact, he would hold on to it even more. Would it be fair for us to go and say, well, one day, what if there's a fire? What if there are storms? What if you get mugged? Someone takes away all your money. That could happen. Therefore, throw all your money away. Is he going to do that? No, because he's going to say, well, that's the future. I'll worry about it when it comes. But right now, I have my money and I can live a good life, so what's the problem? This is why I suggested to you, what we need to be frustrated in is the money that he has right now. What if that money is monopoly money? What if that money is fake money? And you can prove to that man, this money is fake money. Now the problem is not that he had to work hard for it. Now the problem is not that come fire, storm, robber, money is going to be taken away. Now his problem is, this money is worthless. So the problem is now not in the past, it's not in the future, it's in the present moment. And likewise, whenever we go to a sight, a sound, a smell, a taste or a touch, and we expect pleasure from it, it's one thing to say, well, you had to work hard to get pleasure from the outside world. Therefore be frustrated. Kalakirin. Therefore become frustrated. And let go. Or one might say, well, that chitta that arose is going to pass away. Then you're going to have to be subject to viparinama dukkha. There was sankara dukkha. Then there was viparinama dukkha. If we put forward these two as the causes for someone to let go of pleasure, of ashvada, I don't think that's powerful enough. Because it's fair for that person to ask a question in return. Well, you're talking about the past and the future. At this moment in time, I can enjoy my pleasure. What's the problem? Why worry about the past? Why speak of the future? Let's enjoy the present moment. But one day if you can prove to that person that pleasure is also fake, this flower never had happiness in it, the sight never had happiness, the sight never had pleasure, sounds never had pleasure, taste, touch never had pleasure. Pleasure was nothing other than relief from suffering. When that point has been proved, now you become frustrated in that present moment of pleasure as well. Not because you had to work hard to get the pleasure. Not because it's going to pass away in a moment. Because this moment where I'm enjoying pleasure, or I think I'm enjoying pleasure, is also pointless, meaningless, because this is just fake pleasure. So if you are able to penetrate through the veil of pleasure, then you have seen the dependent origination. If you have seen dependent origination, you are able to penetrate the veil of pleasure. Do either, you are on the path to redemption. You are on the path to emancipation and liberation. That's why the Buddha said, and as I explained to you at the start, the reason that beings go through this transmigrational process in samsara is because they are so attached to pleasure. They don't realize what lies behind pleasure. They don't realize the full story that lies behind the pleasure. They don't see the back scenes. They don't see what happens behind the curtains. You watch a movie and it looks like the actors, they're having a lot of fun. But that's because you're not the director. That's because you haven't been there. You haven't seen what happens behind the scenes. You haven't seen how many times they say, cut, again. You haven't seen all that hard work and labor that has to go into it. Because all you see is the world that has been portrayed in front of you. Because we've not used wisdom to penetrate this veil of pleasure, this veil of ignorance. So when you see that, you will begin to realize there is nothing in this world that is worth attaching to. Because what were we attached to all time in samsara? To things that brought us pleasure. What is pleasure now? It's the relief from suffering. Nothing else. Is there a point in attaching to sights or sounds or smells or tastes or touch in the hope of pleasure? Is there? No. Why? Because sight, sound, smell, taste, touch never had pleasure, so they're not going to bring you any pleasure. So what's the point of attaching to them then? It was just the relief from suffering, and that suffering was expectation that you set yourself. You say, I want X. You get X, you're happy. You say, I want Y. You get Y, you're happy. Now is happiness in X or Y? Which one of these is happiness in? X or Y? Neither. You asked for X, you got X. Now you're happy not because happiness was in X. You're happy because you got what you asked for. That's why you're happy. Because setting that expectation itself was the start of uneasiness, vexation, pain and suffering. That pain you were relieved from. That's all. When you're hungry, what can relieve you from hunger? Just food? What can relieve you from hunger? Something. Doesn't have to be food. Does it have to be food? What if you ate red bricks? Would you not be relieved from hunger? Well, there will be consequences later on, yes. But I'm speaking of hunger. Wouldn't you be relieved of hunger? What about sand? Yes. Polythene? Why do cows eat polythene? To relieve themselves from hunger. What about grass? Yes, that will relieve you of hunger. Anything that goes into the stomach is going to relieve you from hunger. It doesn't have to be food. It just happens to be that as intelligent human beings, we take food. That's just coincident. That's just coincidental that we take food. Just so that it doesn't cause us harm later on. That's why we take food. But if it's just hunger that we are trying to deal with, anything can relieve ourselves from hunger, provided there's something that goes into the stomach. Right? And similarly, when you're in a state of vexation, it doesn't matter what comes in. All you need is to be relieved from vexation. Whether that is Rupa Vedana Sanya Sankara Vijnana, whether that's sight, sound, smell, taste or touch, whether that's Richard, Sam, Bob, John or Jane, it really doesn't matter. It doesn't matter what comes from the outside world, because none of them can bring you happiness. So it doesn't matter what comes in. If none of them can bring you happiness, does it matter what comes in? No. If there were some things that could bring you happiness and others that couldn't, now it matters, right? Because then you will only want those things that can bring you happiness to come in. But if none of them have happiness, then does it matter what comes in? No. You just need something to relieve yourself from hunger. And likewise, when this mind is in a state of vexation, it just needs something to relieve itself from that vexation. And when it does, at that point you feel pleasure. Now you go and attach yourself to pleasure, thinking that it was that outside object that came in that brought bagfuls of pleasure on its back and offloaded it on your mind. For as long as that continues to be our belief, our perspective, our view, you continue to attach yourself to the outside world. And then continue to go looking for jewels in the maze, not knowing that every jewel you touch is a hologram. So this is your story. This is the story also of your ancestors and their ancestors. This is what you've been doing throughout samsara. It's quite ironical that I have to remind you what you've been doing throughout many yawns in samsara. I have to remind you. But this is all you've been doing, nothing else. This is all I've been doing as well, nothing else. But that's why experiencing and feeling and seeing are two entirely different things. We've been doing this throughout samsara, but not seeing what we were doing. We were just going through the motions. We were just experiencing and feeling the pain that came. We were feeling the pleasure that came. But we didn't stop to analyze. We didn't stop to think. What was the truth that we were blinded to? Because we were not fortunate enough to come across the teaching of a Supreme Buddha. That's why. We were not fortunate enough to be in the association of noble ones. That's why. Once we have received that gift, once we have begun to see the truth, it's now time to look for those exit boards. They're there. That breadcrumb is there. Still there. It'll be there for about another couple of centuries. But that's all. That's all. After that, you're going to have to wait for another Buddha to come and find the way and then tell us how to get out. While it's there, let's not go running after holograms, trying to catch holograms. Let's be intelligent, let's be wise, because otherwise we're just wasting our time in samsara. Pointless, meaningless. Nothing in this world really brought you happiness. Nothing. Not in the human worlds, not in the Deva worlds, not in the Brahma worlds. There is nothing in the 31 worlds of existence that can bring you happiness. Because I say so? Then why so? Why so? What was it that brought you happiness all along? Relief from suffering. Not the outside world. So if you want to go and be happy in the Deva worlds, what must you do? Suffer and then find relief from suffering. If you want to be happy in the Brahma worlds, what must you do? Suffer and then find relief from suffering. Well, isn't that what you're doing here already? You're not going to be doing any different in the Deva worlds or in the Brahma worlds. You're not going to be doing anything different. You're going to be doing exactly what you're doing right now. So what's the rush with going to Deva worlds? Why so keen on going to the Brahma worlds then? Because you're going to be doing exactly the same thing. You're not going to be doing anything different. It's the same thing. There's nothing in the 31 worlds of existence, ladies and gentlemen, that can bring you happiness. Because all those things are conditioned. If you attach yourself to a conditioned world, your happiness is conditional. I'm not happy to settle for conditional happiness. I want unconditional happiness. Yes, madam, did you have a question? I'm looking for unconditional happiness. Are you? Well, then begin to act. You got to do something about it. If you've seen that there is nothing in this 31 realms of existence that can bring you happiness, ladies and gentlemen, then it's time to act. You've got the 20%. Now it's time for the 80%. This is 80-20, Pareto principle throughout. It's time to act. I can only give you 20. The Buddha can also only give you 20. The remaining 80 lies with you. So contemplate. Reflect on this. How do you reflect on this in practical life? It's not the moments of pain that you need to worry about. Seriously, it's not the moments of pain you need to worry about. Because that's not what brings you... if you know that something's painful, you're not going to go and attach yourself to it. Remember, Dukkha Vedana Pacca was Patiga. And then Adimokha. It was never Tanha. What was Dukkha Samudayare Satya? Was it Patiga? No, it was Tanha. The cause for all suffering is attachment, not Patiga. It's Tanha, not Patiga. So when there's pain, you will do everything there is to redeem yourself, relieve yourself from pain. But when there's pleasure, an ignorant mind will do everything in its power to attach itself to the source of pleasure. That's where the problem starts. Attachment. So you don't really have to contemplate on points of pain, although that's where most people worry. That's where most people contemplate on. Oh, I'm sad. Why am I suffering? Why am I sad? Why am I unhappy? Really, that's not what you should be thinking about. Those moments in life where you feel pleasure, be careful. That's what you need to contemplate on. Finally, I'll say this and then I conclude the sermon. I might have shared this with you maybe perhaps in a previous sermon some time ago. Most people use the Buddha's teaching, or at least the Buddha's philosophy, incorrectly. They use it for one of these two things. They use it for blessings, and then they use it as a repair shop for broken things. Blessings like you get when you go to a kovil. Or at the church, when a child gets blessed, blessed water. When a child gets baptized, I'm not saying there's anything wrong with that. All I'm saying is that is not what we ought to be using the Buddha's philosophy for, his doctrine for. There's a greater purpose to achieve. A guy sees a girl in his class or at the workplace and thinks, she's pretty. Let me make her mine. Time passes by, he makes effort, and eventually they end up husband and wife. Now what the guy does is takes the wife and goes to the temple. Now he goes for refuge from the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha. Goes running to the temple and says, Swami Nuhasa, please could you bless us? We are newly married. Can you chant some pirit and put a pirit nula around our wrists? Give us your blessings, would you? See, blessings. This is why he came to the temple. And then they start living a happily married life. I don't know where one of those exists, but hey ho. And then eventually, one of them leaves the other. Either willingly or unwillingly. Death can come along as well, right? Or it could be willingly. I'm no longer interested in you. I have other plans. And when that happens, the guy comes back running into the temple again. Oh, Swami Nuhansa, please fix me. I'm broken. My heart's broken. I'm weeping. Look at me. Please help me. Can you preach some Dhamma to me so I can fix my mind up again? He's just walked into a repair shop. That's what he's walked into. First he walked into a blessing shop. Now he's walked into a repair shop. Isn't this what most people use the Dhamma for? And then, let's say, between getting married and the wife dying or passing away, they decide to have a child. The wife gets pregnant, again goes back into the temple. Swami Nuhansa, my wife is with child. Please could you bless her? Please can you chant Angulimala Pirita? And sprinkle some holy water? and tie the pirit nool again? The whole malarkey again? Yes, of course, yeah, happy to help. Because, the Swamin once is there to give you what you ask for. Surely, right? And then one day, the child breaks a leg, falls ill. Now again, the mother and the father carrying the child runs back to the temple. Oh, Swamin Hansa, please can you help us fix this broken child? Maybe a Buddha puja, maybe a Bodhi puja. Again, walked into a repair shop. Where on the temple does it say blessing shop and repair shop? Which temple has those labels? This is not why we ought to take refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha, ladies and gentlemen. That guy really should have run to the temple the day he saw that girl in class and he felt his heart started beating faster. What is the cause of all suffering? Attachment. That's when he should have run to the temple. That's when he should have run to the temple and said, oh Swami Nuhansa, that girl in class, when I see her, I forget everything. I lose my senses. Please help me. Ever heard of a guy who did that? What a shame. That's the pity. Because that is what the Buddha's doctrine is for. If attachment is the cause of all suffering, then what is it that has to be ceased? Attachment. Remember I said, don't divorce your wife? Divorce attachment. It's not your wife that brought you trouble. Attachment brought you trouble. Don't divorce your husband. Divorce attachment. Because it's attachment that brought you suffering. Not the husband or the wife. They're harmless. If the guy had done that, would he have had to go back to the temple, to that repair shop, and ask the monk for help when the girl left? When the couple decided to have a child, was it not that moment when they should have run to the temple and said, oh Swami Nuhansa, my wife and I, we feel like we want to have a child. Please can you preach some Dhamma so that we can change our mind? So that we no longer want to do that. We no longer want to go through that and bring a child into this world. Because what's going to happen now? Attachment. In the mind, already attached. Because at that point you can reverse. But the moment the child comes into the mother, now there's no reversing. Now it's too late. If he had done that, he would never have to have gone into the repair shop again for a Bodhi puja. Because the child broke a leg. Because there was no child to break a leg. If he had only done that. So, ask yourselves, what do you seek refuge in the Buddha, Dhamma and the Sangha for? Do you seek refuge for blessings? Or do you seek refuge as a repair shop? If it's one or the other, or both, then I'm sorry to say, you have really not taken homage in the Buddha. You have not taken refuge in the Dhamma or the Sangha. You have not seen the Buddha yet. You have seen who the Buddha was, but not who the Buddha is. You have seen what the Dhamma was, but not what the Dhamma is. You have seen who the Sangha was, but not what the Sangha is. Attachment is what causes suffering every single time. The moment you see attachment, the moment you experience that moment of pleasure, treat it then and there. Treat it then and there, ladies and gentlemen. If you want to go to Nibbana, if you want to attain Nibbana, be mindful of the moments of pleasure, not the moments of pain. Most people spend a lot of time and effort focusing on moments of pain. That's not what brought us suffering. It's the moments of pleasure that brought us suffering. Remember, the rat had to take the second class, which was how to avoid the lure of the bait, not the trap. The trap is painful, but the bait is very pleasurable. That's what it needs to try to avoid. That's why I say, in practical life, when you experience moments of pleasure, and you will, sitting in front of a TV, Your favorite TV program comes on. What do you experience? Pain or pleasure? Yeah. You see someone you like. You see someone you love. Pain or pleasure? Pleasure. You get to eat some food which you find delicious. Pain or pleasure? Pleasure. That's what you need to be careful of. That's what you need to beware. Because if you're experiencing pleasure right now, then guess what? You are in a state of suffering. Yes, madam. Yes, yes. To see that whatever you're attached to, the reason that you're experiencing this pleasure right now is because you were in a state of vexation beforehand. It's the relief from vexation that always brought me happiness. If that is the case, what is the point of this happiness? What is the point of this pleasure? It's meaningless, pointless, essenceless. Hit yourself, then apply some oil, that feels good. You enjoy that, what should you do again? Hit yourself again. If that is how pleasure can be sought, then what is the point of that pleasure? Meaningless, essenceless, pointless, right? That's where asaratte. That's where you need to be seeing asaratte. Anattang asara kattenati. You can look at anicca, you can look at dukkha, you can look at anatta. Any of these three ways. They all work equally well. Those whose faculty, those who are primarily advanced in wisdom, or rather in shraddha, conviction, they see the world through anicca. Those who are primarily advanced and advanced in the sense of effort, virya, they see the world through dukkha. And those who are advanced in their view of in prajna, wisdom, they see the world through anatta. Even bodhisattvas are like that, right? You will have heard of that, possibly. Bodhisattvas, prajnatika buduvaru, shraddhadika buduvaru, viryadika buduvaru. Their prime faculty was either wisdom, effort, or shraddha. Gautama Samma Sambuddhajan Vahanse was a bodhisattva who was more advanced in prajna than the other two. Maitri Buddhajan Vahanse is one who is advanced in virya, in effort, more so than prajna. There are many times in the Jataka stories where Maitri Bodhisattva and Vahanse and Gautama Bodhisattva and Vahanse met many occasions. And on those occasions where there was an opportunity for them to engage in a meritorious deed, Gautama Bodhisattva and Vahanse always took a chance there. He always took the lead. On one occasion where they were both Brahmins walking in the forest, and they heard a noise, and that noise was coming from an animal. And when they approached, they could see that there was a large pit into which a tiger, a mother tiger, had just given birth to a litter, a young litter of 2 or 3 baby tigers. Now, these two bodhisattvas were observing this, and they realized that this mother tiger must be famished, hungry. So what they were looking at was this mother tiger was approaching the baby tigers to eat them, because it was so hungry. But as soon as she approached the babies, she realized, no, I cannot do this. This is my litter. These are my babies. So it walks away, and then it goes another turn, unable to bear the pain of hunger. It does this several times, and then these two bodhisattvas, they discuss between themselves, and then they agree that if we don't do something about this, this mother is going to eat those baby tigers very, very shortly. So we better go and find her some food, because she's famished. So what Maitri Bodhisattva and Vahanse does is he suggests to Gautama Bodhisattva and Vahanse, why don't you watch God, I'll go and grab some meat for this animal. And he goes away. He takes some time to go and find something for this animal to eat. But when he comes back, he couldn't see his friend that he left behind. He looks around, but there's nowhere to be seen. And the mother tiger is not crying anymore. There's no noise coming from the pit. So he walks up close to the pit, and he looks down into the pit and he sees there's a pool of blood. But none of the baby tigers have been hurt. And the mother is comfortably sleeping. And then he looks around the pit. There are no footsteps. The last footsteps were seen of them approaching the pit, but there are no footsteps of anyone leaving the pit. So he realizes what's happened. What did the Gautama Bodhisattva Maharaj do? He jumped into the pit to sacrifice himself so that the mother tiger would not eat the baby tigers. Why did he do that? Do you think it was just to sate that tiger's hunger? No. It was to put us out of our hunger, to relieve us from this pain in samsara. That's why our Bodhisattva and Mahansa, he was prime in his wisdom. So he realized this is an opportunity I'm not going to get again. If he goes away and comes back with some food, then we are just going to be offering that food. Or perhaps this mother, leave it a bit longer, it's going to eat the baby tigers. So now I've got this opportunity, I'm going to sacrifice my life. May this sacrifice enable me to become a Samma Sambuddhajana Mahansa one day. And just like I am relieving this mother tiger of her hunger, may I be able to redeem all suffering from all sentient beings. With that firm resolve, he jumped into the pit to sacrifice himself. Anyway, I digressed. But it's good to learn a thing or two about how our Bodhisattva and Mahansa came through in samsara and how much he's done for us so that we have the gift of Dhamma today. At Lord Dipankara's feet, he had every opportunity to put a stop, but he didn't. Because that's not what a Buddha comes into this world for. A Buddha comes into this world to relieve all sentient beings from suffering. And that includes you, madam, includes you, sir, and me. All of us here. Everyone that's listening to this sermon, everyone that's unable to listen to this sermon, everyone, all sentient beings in all 31 realms of existence, every single one. Not everyone's going to make use of it, but that was his sacrifice. That was his resolve, his determination. So if you want to do right by the Buddha, if you want to do justice to the sacrifice that he did, what do you think we all ought to do then? Make use of the gift that he gave us. Make it part of our lives. All that sacrifice, let's make sure that it wasn't a waste of time. Let's make sure that it didn't go in vain. Let's make sure that when we shed our last breath, in this lifetime, I'm not talking about the next, in this lifetime, when you shut your eyes for the last time, promise yourself, ladies and gentlemen, that I will look at the Buddha in his face. You might be blind by then, but you will have seen what the Buddha looks like. You will look at the Buddha in his eyes and say, Lord Buddha, your effort was not in vain. Your sacrifice for me, I made the most of it. Today, you are my father, and you may call me your son. You may call me your daughter. Then look at the Buddha's face, and you will see a very subtle smile on his face. He will say, my efforts was not in vain. That's all He wants from us. Let's make sure, each of us, you, I, we all, let's make sure each of us, we make a firm resolve that before we shed our last breath, before we shut our eyes for the last time, we make sure that the Buddha's efforts, the Bodhisattva's efforts, all that sacrifice, many millions of eons, was not in vain. Let's make sure we pay our gratitude. All happy to do that? Let's do that then. Let's do that. We can do that. Let's do that. Okay, so with that we'll conclude the sermon then. So before we conclude, let's take a moment to chant the Arya Maitri Bhavana. If there are any of you who don't have a copy, then please speak to Mrs. Amanda and she'll be happy to provide you with a copy if she has any spare. You don't have to do that just now, madam, perhaps later on. So for now, if you don't have one to hand, then just reflect on what it is I say, and that will do good for now. But later on, make available a copy for yourself. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fire of birth, freed from the fire of decay, freed from the fire of illness, freed from the fire of death, freed from the fire of sorrow, freed from the fire of lamentation, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the fire of suffering, freed from the fire of discontentment, freed from the fire of exhaustion, freed from the fire of disappointment, freed from the fire of clinging on to the five aggregates, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the suffering of samsara, freed from the disease of samsara, freed from the fear of samsara, freed from the fire of samsara, freed from the burning of samsara, freed from the sorrow of samsara, freed from the lust of samsara, freed from the clutches of samsara, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. The karma worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from the karma worlds. The rupa worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from the rupa worlds. The arupa worlds are in despair.
May I and all beings be freed from the arupa world. All worlds are in despair. May I and all beings be freed from all the world. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Letting go is the only salvation. May I and all beings let go. Detachment is the only salvation. May I and all beings be detached. Being freed is the only salvation. May I and all beings be freed. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. Nibbana is the only salvation. May I and all beings attain Nibbana. May I and all beings in all worlds be freed from the bondage of lust, freed from the bondage of aversion, freed from the bondage of delusion, freed from the bondage of Mara, healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana, 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 healed with the ultimate bliss of Nibbana. Okay. Before we conclude then, let us take a moment to transfer the merits that we have all acquired today to all those who deserve merits. I remind you, as I do always, bear in mind that it may be the case that today some of us have been born human because there were those who sacrificed themselves by committing unwholesome deeds simply to save us from committing those very deeds. Today they may be in the woeful plane only so that we were able to be born in the blissful plane. Just think about your parents for a moment in this birth. How much unwholesome, unmeritorious deeds might they have done just to save you from doing them? So what about your past births? So reflect on that for a moment. And whenever we transfer these merits just like you would to your own mother, to your own father. Because even if the tiny insect, the tiny ant that got squashed under your foot was one day a mother, a father to you, then all these beings that we remind and transfer merits to were undeniably, invariably parents to all of us. Reflect on that and be prepared to transfer the merits to all those who deserve the merits. First and foremost, let us take a moment to once again remind ourselves, reflect and contemplate on the fact that it is because of the supremely enlightened Samma Sambuddhāna Mahanse, the perfect one, the peerless one, the unparalleled one, the supremely enlightened one, that we have the gift of Dhamma today. It is because of His infinite compassion, His infinite wisdom, His infinite sacrifice in samsara for the benefit, for the emancipation and liberation of all sentient beings that today we have the gift of Dhamma. It is also thanks to the Bhikkhu Bhikkhunis, Upasaka Upasikas, who many of them sacrificed their lives in order that they were able to protect and preserve the Dhamma and pass down the gift of Dhamma through many generations all the way down to us in the form of the Tripitaka. If any of them have today been born in the woeful planes, may through the power of these merits they be able to be born in the blissful plane. May through the power of these merits they abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also let us take a moment to transfer merits to all members of the Mahasangha who fulfill an enormous duty to protect and preserve the Sambuddha Shasana, the Mahanayakas, the Anunayakas, as well as all other members of the Mahasangha who are dedicated to that cause. Also let us take a moment to, particularly on this occasion, transfer merits to the members of the Mahasangha in your local temples and nunneries, the Bhikkhu, Bhikkhunis, Upasakas and Upasikas who are resident in your local temples and nunneries, because although you come along to our monastery, listen to sermons, offer dana and so on and so forth, please remind yourselves that it is the monks and nuns in your local temples and nunneries who are always by your side, through thick and thin, through rain and shine, always prepared to help you in your worldly, mundane affairs as well as your supramundane matters. They who also donned robes to attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana have today put aside some of that time to ensuring your happiness and your fulfillment in society. So let us take a moment to transfer merits to them as well. May through the power of these merits they be able to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also let us take a moment to transfer merits to the Devas, Brahmas, spirits, demons and the dead, as well as those ancestors, those who might have predeceased us in our infinitely long journey in samsara, those beings who might have been our mothers, fathers, brothers, sisters, uncles, aunts, nephews, sons, daughters, grandparents, so on and so forth. If any of them have in any way, shape or form helped you, supported you, assisted you in any way, shape or form, let us take this opportunity to transfer merits to them. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may through the power of these merits they be able to free themselves from those woeful planes and be born in the blissful plane. And for all beings in the blissful plane, may through the power of these merits they be able to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also let us take a moment to transfer merits to all those who helped make this event possible, beginning with your parents who may be alive today or perhaps have been deceased. Spare a moment for them and transfer merits to them. Also your teachers who from your very young ages shaped you up and taught you right from wrong so that you grew up to become law-abiding citizens. May they all also be able to rejoice in these merits. Also those who made this very event possible by inviting you to be here today, by offering you transport to be here today, or perhaps by offering you a glass of water, or perhaps a meal to sate your hunger, perhaps by ushering you to a seat or making your stay comfortable by arranging the facilities that are available to you today. If any of them have supported you, helped you, assisted you in any way, shape or form, may they all be able to rejoice in these merits. May through the power of these merits, if any of them have been born in the woeful planes, they be able to free themselves from those woeful planes. For all beings in the blissful plane, may through the power of these merits they be able to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also let us take a moment to transfer merits to the members of the armed forces and members of the police force who sacrificed their lives on many occasions to protect and preserve the peace and harmony of all civilians who live in this country. It is thanks to them that we have a country in which we can live in peace and harmony with even those who have different views and opinions to us. May they all be able to rejoice in these merits. If any of them have been born in the woeful planes, may through the power of these merits they be able to free themselves from those woeful planes and be born in the blissful planes. May through the power of these merits they be able to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Also let us take a moment to transfer merits to those innocent civilians who might have lost their lives in the war, as well as those who might have lost their lives in natural disasters and calamities such as the tsunamis, earthquakes, so on and so forth, not just in Sri Lanka but also in other parts of the world, if any of them are today seeking merits, may they be able to rejoice in the merits that we have all acquired today. If any of them have been born in woeful planes, may they be able to free themselves from those woeful planes. For those beings in the blissful planes, may through the power of these merits they be able to abstain from the unmeritorious deeds, fulfill the meritorious deeds, fulfill the noble eightfold path, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, take a moment once again to remind yourself of all the merits that you will have acquired through the course of this day. You may have offered flowers to the Buddha, made offerings to the Dhamma, made offerings to the Mahasangha, as well as listen to this sermon, preaching this sermon. Remind yourselves of all the merits that you will have acquired through the course of this evening, through the course of this day. May through the power of all those merits that we have all acquired today, we be able to witness on this blessed land many hundreds of thousands of Arahatun Mahanses in our this birth itself. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. And finally, may all of us, anyone and everyone who might have contributed to this sermon in any way, shape or form, be able to become one of those Arahatun Mahanses, one of those Arahat Mehinin Mahanses in this very birth itself, in the era of the Gautama Samma Sambuddhajan Mahanse itself, and attain the supreme bliss of Nibbana. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. The members of the Mahasangha will pass on their blessings to you. Raga ginnen midetva, dvesha ginnen midetva, moha ginnen midetva, Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Mamada siyalu loka siyalu satvayo. Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Tunuruwange suvisi ananta maha guna balin silu loka silu sattayoma Nibbana parama sukhayen sukhita taravetva. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May I and all beings be freed from the fire of desire. May I and all beings be freed from the fire of aversion. May I and all beings be freed from the fire of delusion. May the noble triple gem bless you all. Teruvan Saranai.